In Russia, on the shores of the Baltic Sea, there's an enigmatic national park. The Dancing Forest is a place that no scientist has managed to explain so far. The pine trees of the forest are all crooked and twisted into loops and spirals. The forest didn't appear until the early 60s, when the pines were planted in order to make the sand dune in that area more stable. One theory is that it's the unstable sand that made the trees twist in such a way. Other theories for the crooked trees are strong winds, or even supernatural powers. Some people say the forest is a place where positive and negative energies meet, twisting the trees. Local legend says that if a person climbs through one of the rings of a tree, it'll add an extra year to this person's life, or they'll be granted a wish. I like that one. Speaking of bizarre trees, and one grows in the region of Piedmont, Italy. There, a cherry tree grows on the top of a mulberry tree. The strange thing is that both trees are perfectly healthy. A continuous storm at Saturn's North Pole has an odd shape, a hexagon. This is probably because of the gradient of the winds. The total length of this cloud pattern is 9,000 miles, which is about 1,200 miles longer than the Earth's diameter. The hexagon has been observed for many years, but it gets even more mysterious because it changes color too. It used to be turquoise, but it has recently shifted to a golden color. The reason for the color change is that the pole gets exposed to sunlight as the seasons change. Now, rain isn't unusual for Oakville, Washington. However, this one still doesn't have any solid scientific explanation. Instead of common raindrops, people watch translucent jelly-like blobs fall from the skies. These blobs covered about 20 square miles. Those who got really close to the rain experienced flu-like symptoms. What were the blobs? Researchers claim that the blobs contain human white blood cells. Later tests showed no presence of nuclei. Some people claim the blobs might have been evaporated jellyfish resulting in rain, or maybe even waste from a commercial plane. Walking rocks, also known as sailing rocks, move across the Death Valley National Park in California without any external intervention, leaving long trails in the dirt and sand along their way. Various time-lapse footages of the moving rocks have been taken. Scientists even installed GPS navigators on some of the rocks, and it showed that the rocks move at a considerable speed. Some researchers believe that the movement is due to thin sheets of ice that form overnight at freezing temperatures in the valley, letting the rocks move until it melts during the day. Or there was a Rolling Stones concert. Nah. The Batagayka crater in Siberia looks like a doorway to the underworld. It's about a half-mile long and over 280 feet deep, but it never stops growing. As it gets deeper, it exposes more underground layers. The layers show what our planet looked like thousands of years ago, as the slumps reveal the used-to-be climates. The crater appeared back in the 60s, and it all started with rapid deforestation. Trees no longer cast shade on the ground, and it got hotter. The permafrost melted, resulting in the crater formation. The throbbing hum in Taos, New Mexico has driven locals wild since the 1990s. The low-frequency hum deprives people of sleep and depletes their energy. Even though scientists have tried to find the source of the hum, they still haven't pinpointed its origin. Different variations of the hum have also been heard in the UK, Australia, Canada, and other areas of the US. Luckily, only about 2% of the world's population can hear it. The hums have been blamed on mechanical devices, multiple disturbances of auditory systems, and even animals. The West Seattle hum, for example, was blamed on toadfish. Fairy rings, also known as elf rings or pixie rings, are mysterious rings of mushrooms that appear in grasslands and forested areas. There's a lot of debate about why these fungi form a nearly perfect circle. Some superstitions claim that fairy dances would burn the ground, causing mushrooms to rapidly grow. In Costa Rica, there's an assortment of about 300 spherical stone balls. Locals call them las bolas, which is simply the balls in English. These stones have an almost perfect round shape. Some of them are huge, weighing up to 16 tons each. They're also made of different materials – gabbro, limestone, and sandstone. They're considered to have been put in straight lines in front of the chief's houses, but there's no precise information of their origin. Some myths claim that these stones originated in Atlantis. If you ever travel to the Mekong River in late October, you have a chance of seeing glowing balls rising from the water and beelining up into the air. Locals call these glowing balls the Naga fireballs. The size of the lights vary. The reddish balls can be as tiny as a spark and as large as a basketball. There can be dozens to thousands of balls a night. Scientists don't have any solid explanation for why it happens, but it could be due to flammable gases released by the marshy environment. Some superstitious locals are sure it's all because of a giant serpent living in the Mekong. Great balls of fire! In Minnesota, on the north shore of Lake Superior, there's a park known for the Devil's Kettle. This is a waterfall that splits in two. One part of the river continues, while the other part disappears into a hole in the ground. Whatever object you throw into the Devil's Kettle won't reappear. Scientists still haven't fully explained where the water that drops into the hole goes. Devil's Kettle is considered to be unsafe for people because it's nearly impossible to trace the flow. Yeah, not a place to go tubing. Grunions are fish known for their bizarre mating ritual. The females climb out of the water and onto the shore. They dig their tails into the sand in order to lay eggs. The legs stay hidden in the sand, waiting. 10 days later, the high tide comes, washing the newly hatched young to the sea. Scientists still can't give any solid explanation for this way of breeding. People who live in rural central Norway over the Hessdalen Valley can often witness floating lights of white, yellow, and red cross the sky. The lights appear both at day and night, and once back in the 80s, they were spotted 15 to 20 times in a single week. The Hessdalen lights can last just a few seconds, but sometimes they can last more than an hour. The lights move, seeming to float or even sway around. Some scientists believe that the reason for these lights is due to ionized iron dust. Others say it's combustion that includes sodium, oxygen, and hydrogen. Many people claim they're just misidentified aircrafts. Yellowstone Park has a famous boiling lake, but it's not the world's only place of boiling water. Deep in the Amazon, there's the 4-mile Shanay-Timpishka River that's always hot. The name means boiled by the sun. Well, it's not exactly boiling, but it can reach 196 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to cook pasta. Ooh, let's try that. The lowest temperature in these waters is about 113 degrees. This river still can't be scientifically explained because it would require close proximity to a volcano for the water to reach such temperatures. However, the closest volcano is 400 miles away. But there could be a fault between the Earth that could explain this phenomenon. In western Venezuela, locals living close to the Catatumbo River aren't afraid of lightning because they see it almost every single night. It starts at around 7 o'clock and doesn't stop until dawn. The everlasting Catatumbo lightning did once stop for a few months, from January to March 2010. It was probably due to drought, or maybe the charge ran out. In 1991, a scientist suggested that the phenomenon happens because of cold and warm air currents meeting in the area. Another theory is that the lightning could be due to the presence of uranium in the bedrock. Speaking of lightning, I got a bolt. Bye!
Something exciting and kinda unexpected popped out among the rocks of the Ica Valley in Peru. The bones of a really old whale that lived almost 40 million years ago. At first, no one was really impressed because the bones they found were big and weirdly shaped, so people just thought they were looking at giant boulders. I mean, that's cool too, but things got way better when they realized those were the remains of a very large, ancient animal that roamed along the coast of ancient Peru. Plus, it was probably the heaviest creature that ever lived. Sorry, blue whale, I know you worked hard to get to the top. The length of over 100 feet and weight of more than 200 tons brought you the status of the biggest animal on our planet. But it seems you've held the title long enough. Time to hand it over to our next candidate, and that one's really gigantic. This ocean beast was probably shorter than the blue whale, but heavier, with a weight that could be between 93 tons and 370 tons. If it's closer to the higher number, it'll make Paracetus the biggest animal ever known to have lived on Earth. And it seems its weight was the result of having extremely thick, dense bones. You can see such bones today in manatees or some other early whales. Dense bones are a great tool for such marine mammals. This feature makes them heavy and allows them to stay submerged most of the time. But at the same time, if their body was too heavy, they would end up sinking all the time, and they would waste too much energy to move back up to the surface. So, to avoid sinking, marine mammals need to have enough lighter tissues, like muscles and fat, to help them float in the water without using too much energy. Now, scientists didn't have the whole skeleton, which makes it hard to tell how big the animal was. But they used the ratio of the heavy bones to the lighter tissues in other marine mammals to estimate the overall weight of this giant ancient whale. Experts found these fossils about 13 years ago and spent the next decade freeing the whale from the rock. Its anatomy and age showed this whale was a cousin of Basilosaurus, a whale that had a long snout full of sharp teeth, and a sleek body similar to that of an eel. Even if Paracetus wasn't bigger than the blue whale, it was still a giant that ruled the ocean depths. Unlike modern whales, there's a possibility that this ancient fellow was a predator that liked to go after bigger prey. And this also changes how we see the history of whales. Scientists used to think these magnificent creatures became really big about 5 million years ago when they started eating lots of small creatures. But here's the proof that giant whales existed even before that. But it's still unclear how this whale managed to find enough food to sustain its enormous body. Plus, it's still hard to tell what exactly this ancient creature had on its menu. It was pretty large and not such a fast swimmer, so it's possible it searched for food in shallow waters. Then it probably ate crustaceans, clams, or some other small animals hiding in the sand. One theory says it was a scavenger, which basically means it munched on remains of everything that would come its way. It's not so unusual to find marine animals in deserts. Many of these regions used to be covered with water anyway. The Sahara in Africa is a perfect example. About 50 to 100 million years ago, this was not a dry desert, but a shallow saltwater body called the Trans-Saharan Seaway. The land is not wet there anymore, of course, but people who lived in that area knew about it because they used to find old shells across the desert. The sea was about 164 feet deep. That sounds enough for a nice swim. Some would say this area looked like modern Puerto Rico, with lots of sun and shallow water. Mangrove forests were a common thing as well as seafloors covered with mollusks, like snails and clams. The marine sediment that was left behind after the sea had dried up is full of different fossils. And the animal that lived in that ancient underwater world didn't look friendly. Plus, they were much bigger than their relatives from modern times, so a regular-sized human would end up as a snack, not even a whole meal. Normally, when animals live on small islands, they can become much bigger than their relatives from the mainland. This is something we call island gigantism, and it happens because there are more resources or fewer predators on islands. Maybe the same thing happened in the Trans-Saharan Seaway. Even though it wasn't an actual island, the water moved in and out, which created little pockets of water. And specific conditions in these pockets might have helped animals grow bigger. So we're talking about giant sea snakes, catfish, and fish that no longer exist today. One had incredibly strong jaws, and the animal used them to eat hard things and even crush shells. Their teeth showed they were fierce predators other animals had every reason to be afraid of. They went through some changes when it came to diet, similar to some types of piranhas. And the competition to get to the top of the food chain wasn't a joke. Not when there were also such large predators as sharks, crocodiles, and ancient relatives of elephants. Sahara went through different phases. If you could use a time machine and take a peek at Earth's largest hot desert as it was about 6,000 years ago, you wouldn't have to struggle with sand and heat. You'd have a nice walk through a green and pretty lush place. In the past, people who lived in that area didn't leave drawings on cave walls that showed camels, sand dunes, and scorpions. All those things you'd see in today's Sahara. Instead, they drew crocodiles. That's additional evidence that the Sahara used to have a lot of water and plants enough to support these big yet scary animals. Around 3 billion years ago, Earth might have been mostly covered with water. Today, it's about 71% of its surface, but it seems that our planet used to be a giant ocean world with no continents at all, just some scattered islands. Scientists studied special rocks in Western Australia that formed in a place deep under the ocean called a hydrothermal vent system. To explain this better, it's important to mention two common oxygen types, O16 and O18. O18 is heavier because it has extra neutrons. O16 evaporates from water more easily, and as researchers studied an old ocean floor, they found a lot of O18, more than in today's oceans. This way, they realized ancient Earth had less dry land than Earth today. Australia is a good spot to conduct these studies because a long time ago, it also used to be a beautiful place with large animals and lush rainforests. But as time went by, the land became drier and Australia had more deserts formed, such as the Great Victoria Desert. Rainforest remained only on the edges of the continent. What happens with deserts across the globe is called desertification. That's when land that used to be good for growing things turns into a desert or something similar. Our planet changes over time, together with its climate. But desertification also happens because of human activities, like mining, farming, and building cities. And when land turns into a desert, it's a problem because it can't support people and animals anymore. Food doesn't grow there. There's not enough clean water, and animals lose their homes. To help with this problem, there's a plan many countries agreed to. They decided to work with farmers to take care of the land, fix damaged areas, and manage water better. All in all, to make our planet a better place for life. 50 ships and 20 airplanes have gone missing. Many people have disappeared, and mysterious forces might have… Oh wait, the wrong script. This Bermuda Triangle is located in Transylvania. My bad. So, once upon a time in the heart of Transylvania, there was a mysterious place that people named the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. Look at these twisted trees and their tangled undergrowth. It seems like some evil creature may appear from behind a tree at any moment. There might even be ghosts and mysterious creatures that came from space, as stories said. The forest became so popular in the 1960s when a man was chilling there on a warm August afternoon with his girlfriend and a couple of friends. Suddenly, his girlfriend pointed at something unusual in the sky. A man came closer to the spot where she was standing and, to his surprise, saw it too. It was a weird silver disc shining in the sky. He quickly pulled out his camera and took 4 photos before the creepy object bolted away. The object was there for a mere 2 minutes, but the man developed his film and the picture ended up being published in local papers. Many people were skeptical about this. They claimed that those were most likely some weather balloons that looked like a spaceship because they were photographed in odd lighting. But no weather balloons, blimps, or any other objects were in the sky above the forest on that day. Spooky, huh? That's not the only campfire legend from that area. Stories say that those who ventured too deep into the murky depths of this creepy place often did not return, which is how it got its nickname in the first place. There was a shepherd who entered the forest together with his 200 sheep. They were never found again. People have also been whispering stories about a 5-year-old girl who disappeared one day. She re-emerged one day, 5 years later, wearing the same clothes as the day she went missing. Plus, she hadn't aged a day. There are people who entered the forest and did manage to return, but with severe burns, high fever, and some other health issues they didn't have before. Some were sure that happened because the subsoil had lots of natural uranium with a high level of radioactivity. And according to others, it's not unusual that you come to this forest and feel like someone's watching you or your electronic devices just switch off. And now, here's something that's not a legend. The forest has a rich history. Some sources say it was home to the oldest settlement in Romania, dating all the way back to 6,500 BCE. Trees themselves are pretty mysterious. They grow in creepy spirals or have some unexpected zigzag patterns. Even though some scientists have come there to explore this phenomenon, they couldn't find the answer to why they're like this. It seems as if trees are twisting their limbs so they can reach out and grab you when you're not looking. And that's what's interesting. Each of these twisted trees spirals in a clockwise direction. But legends say lots of inexplicable things have happened in a specific part of the forest where you can't find trees or any other types of vegetation. It's a perfect circle called the clearing. The perfect name for a horror movie inspired by all these stories. The soil in this area with no vegetation has been tested, and no one has found any weird stuff or anomalies that could potentially stop plants from growing there. Some locals believe the forest has positive energy, which is why it's good to make a wish there. But many more people let their imagination run wild, telling stories about paranormal activities happening there, like mysterious spheres popping out in the middle of the forest or extraterrestrial lights. Either way, you and your castle can step aside, Dracula, because you're not the only scary story from Transylvania. Here's another reason you won't be able to sleep well tonight. The Isla de las Muñecas, or the Island of the Dolls. In the middle of the eerie and murky waters of canals near Mexico City, there's a small island. It may look charming at first, until you realize it's home to hundreds of dolls hanging from the trees and scattered throughout the overgrown vegetation. These dolls are old and decaying. They've lost their color over time, and their once cheerful faces are now twisted into expressions of despair and horror. There is a sad story behind this disturbing place. It says the island used to be home to a reclusive man who left his family more than 50 years ago to live alone on the island. He started obsessively collecting dolls that were lost in the canal. The story says he even traded products he grew to locals to get more dolls. The man didn't clean these dolls nor show any interest in fixing them. He would just decorate his island with them regardless of the state in which he found them. Even those that looked good ended up ruined due to winds and rain. They weren't just outside, his cabin was full of these scary dolls too. Many people were terrified of this place, claiming it was cursed, but others believed the dolls safeguarded the island. Moving to the suburbs of North London, where you can find the mysterious Highgate Cemetery. It's definitely not a typical resting place for the dearly departed. This cemetery has so many peculiar graves, including those of Karl Marx and Douglas Adams. But that's not what draws visitors to its gates. People come there because of the legends claiming that this place is haunted by all sorts of spooky creatures, including vampires. Yup, stories about shadowy figures hovering over graves with glowing red eyes and sharp fangs never get boring. But this place wasn't always this creepy. It was established in the middle of the 19th century, once neglected and overgrown with crumbling monuments and vegetation that seemed to swallow up graves. But these legends became popular along with the place itself in the 1970s, after the cemetery had appeared in several horror movies. Some visitors there are even self-proclaimed vampire hunters. There's this peaceful and charming village called Pluckley, just a short drive away from London. At least that's what it seems at first sight. People whisper Pluckley could be the most haunted village in England. As you go through its winding streets, you'll come across many spots legends say are haunted. Many of them are connected to the Daring family, which held the title of Lords of the Manor for over 4 centuries. What gives the sense of old times is the round-topped windows on many buildings. Legend has it, hundreds of years ago, Lord Daring escaped when his enemies captured him. He jumped through one of these windows head first. In commemoration of this pretty daring act, every window in the manor house and the village was made in the same style. Even though the manor house burned down in 1951, the legacy of Lord Daring's escape lives on in the charming village of Pluckley. Some say Pluckley is surrounded by the so-called Screaming Wood. There are many legends about paranormal events that have occurred there. There are nice walking trails in this wood, but to be honest, I'd only be brave enough to hit them during the day. And how about the Crooked Forest? It's in Poland, and it consists of 400 pine trees whose trunks take a sharp 90-degree turn and then become weirdly curved, like the letter J. Someone planted them in the early 1930s, but it's still not completely clear how all these trees got the same curve. One scientist said this looked like a typical response to gravity. Plants have a special mechanism that allows them to reorient themselves when the stem is horizontal to gravity. So, these trees may have been grown this way for making boats or furniture. Of course, human imagination goes way beyond science, so many tried to explain the existence of these trees with stories of spirits that possess these trees or mysterious creatures from space that made them this way. Okay, I'm on. Let me just grab my popcorn. Nature can ruin your life with a tsunami, hurricane, tornado, rainstorm, and many other destructive events. But did you know that it also has other, weirder ways to destroy? Let's take a look at the most unusual natural phenomena. How about the orange rain? It's not that orange drops are falling on you. No, the whole sky and the atmosphere are turning dark orange. Orange clouds are pouring dirty orange drops on you. Don't worry, they're not poisonous, but watch your eyes. Don't let the drops get in because they contain sand particles. If you want to see this unusual phenomenon, go to the Canary Islands. Every year, the sky turns orange there and pours orange-red drops of water mixed with sand onto the ground. This phenomenon happens because of the Sahara. In the desert, strong winds blow millions of tons of dust and sand into the air. All this mess penetrates the atmosphere and turns the sky orange. Then, the particles from the Sahara fly toward the Canary Islands and fall on people in the form of heavy rain. Residents of this region experience breathing problems and poor vision in the orange conditions. Airports stop working. All flights are canceled. Under favorable conditions, a storm that carries sand particles can reach both the Mediterranean and Northern Europe. Therefore, if you suddenly see red rain, don't be scared. This is not the apocalypse. Warning, this kind of rain causes anxiety. During this phenomenon, you won't see drops of water. There will be spiders falling from the sky. People have faced spider rains in Australia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. These creatures are called money spiders, or sheet web weavers. During strong winds, they climb as high as possible to the tops of plants, bushes, and fences. Then, they release a parachute-shaped web, and the wind blows them into the sky. They fly high into the air, meeting birds, cold winds, and harsh weather. Not everyone can survive this journey. Then, when the weather calms down, this tiny party lands on the ground. No one knows why spiders behave this way. According to one version, they fly away from places where flooding can begin. In other words, it's a forced migration. And because of this migration, spiders often become the first settlers of territories that have been destroyed by fires or other natural phenomena. But don't worry, these creatures are harmless to humans. They just want to live and multiply. Although, to be honest, it's hard to stay calm when thousands of arthropods are falling on your head. Tornadoes are a destructive force. But look at this. A whirlwind appears during a snowstorm. It's sucking in more and more snow. Now, it's not just a tornado, but a snow-nado. It looks like something terrible and destructive, but don't worry, it's not as scary as it seems. This is a fairly rare disaster that has recently occurred in Utah. The snow tornado came across a man and his dog on its way. It looked impressive and dangerous. Fortunately, no one got hurt. This phenomenon occurs when an air vortex raises snow from the ground. If you see a similar vortex next to you, don't panic. Usually, such phenomena are harmless and don't have enough force to destroy things. This natural phenomenon is much more dangerous than the snow-nado. Just imagine that a mountain of chunks of ice is moving along roads, sweeping away everything in its path. It looks like a tsunami, but instead of water, there are ice boulders. The ice tsunami can destroy houses, cars, and trees. It can move on grass, asphalt, and sand. It can jump out of the water like a crazy salmon. Fortunately, the ice tsunami is not a frequent phenomenon. It occurs when three conditions are met: a flat coast, loose ice, and strong wind. Waves and wind are throwing broken pieces of ice onto the shore. These ice flows accumulate into a huge wall, and then, during strong winds, this ice monster begins to move. Therefore, if you see a large pile of ice near the water, move away from this place as far as possible. And we're back to the tornado again. You already know about snow tornadoes. You've probably seen the footage of tornadoes in a desert when the wind blows sand into the air in documentaries. Tornadoes pass over the ocean's surface and can create a funnel inside the water. But there's a phenomenon that's even cooler and more impressive. It's a fire tornado. Surely not many of you have heard about this thing. It's a very dangerous phenomenon, but people have ventured close to the fiery tornado to study it. But firefighters, by the way, often encounter this devastating phenomenon. A fire tornado forms during forest fires, and sometimes it can appear inside a burning building. If you see a big flame and feel a strong wind, be careful. A fiery funnel may form. But how does this happen? Let's first look at the origin of an ordinary tornado. So, we're somewhere in a dry place in the middle of a hot day. The sun heats the air that is close to the ground. Its lower layers absorb more energy than the upper ones. An increase in temperature makes this air less dense and more buoyant. Then it lifts into the sky in the form of long columns. This rise has a spiral movement. The water in your bathtub moves similarly when it flows through the drain hole. So many of these air vortices are quite weak, and you can't see them. But some of them encounter strong air currents. This accelerates their movement, adds energy, and increases the area. More and more air gets into this vortex, making it stronger. When dust and sand get into these whirlwinds, you see a tornado. The fire tornado follows the same pattern, with only one difference. The air below is heated, not by the sun, but by fire. Fire heats the air, it rises, rotates, and pulls the fire inside. Some of the vortices can reach up to 400 feet high and 50 feet wide. It's like a thin, leaning tower of Pisa made of fire, only twice as tall. This is a truly devastating and terrifying phenomenon. The ground is shaking. Flocks of birds are flying away. You can hear a loud, low rumble. The volcano spits out a giant ash cloud. Lava is flowing from the mouth of the fiery mountain. Rivers of fire are running down and dashing towards you. You have nowhere to escape. The fire is getting closer and closer and… Wait a minute. This lava isn't hot. It's cold. How is that possible? You can observe cold lava flows near many volcanoes. In Indonesia, for example, this phenomenon has recently destroyed entire villages. Yes, it's not hot, but it's still dangerous. Cold lava streams occur when hot lava mixes with ash, sand, and pebbles during wet weather. In a sense, the volcano spews out streams of heavy mud. It covers roads, houses, cars, and trees. Cold lava flows are a destructive phenomenon, so stay away from them. Even if some volcano is very beautiful and you want to take cool photos, don't take any chances. Okay, let's relax a little and end our video with something fun. How about surfing? But instead of ordinary waves, we have icy ones. This phenomenon is called the ice wave. It looks as if someone paused a wave while it was forming before it hit the water. It's a rare occurrence, but you can find it on Mount Washington. The top of the mountain is shrouded in fog most of the year. Cold temperatures, humidity, and winds form frost. Then strong winds force this frost sideways, and thus a wavy shape forms. And when there's a wave, you can ski or snowboard inside, like a surfboard. But be careful, it's pretty cold in there, so wear warm clothes. If you were visiting Earth from another planet, your rational mind just wouldn't understand how singing dunes and moving balls of lightning were scientifically possible. I bet you'll feel like these images are just stills from your favorite sci-fi movie. You better hope you never find yourself alone near Catatumbo River in Venezuela during one of its lightning storms. Because if you were, you'd be surprised to find out that lightning works both ways, meaning it can come from the sky and from the ground. Terrifying, I know. Scientists think that in this case, it probably happens because of a high presence of uranium in the bedrock. But it can also happen due to cold and warm air currents that meet around that area. This makes the electric field get all charged up and the bolt flips, traveling from ground to cloud. Scientists even have a fancy name for it: upward lightning. This special place called Catatumbo River became famous because of its light shows. Actually, the name means House of Thunder in the local language. This phenomenon happens for up to 160 nights a year, and it can last around 9 hours a day. When scientists counted, they realized that the area could produce anything from 16 to 40 flashes of lightning per minute. Now, you've probably heard of Marco Polo, the 13th century Venetian merchant and world traveler. Well, in one of his voyages, he came across what he could only describe as singing dunes. The dunes literally started rumbling, like they were playing drums, and freaked him out so much he thought it was the works of evil, invisible entities messing with him. Fast forward to our times, and scientists have discovered how sand dunes produce these rumbles. A team of scientists studied a singing dune in Morocco. They chose a large, crescent-shaped one that makes noise all year round. If the wind is right, this dune can sing a few times every afternoon. It turns out that the wind forces sand to accumulate at the top of the dune until the angle of the slope reaches a tipping point of about 35 degrees. This accumulated sand drops down like an avalanche, and that's what produces a sound. The sand needs to be dry enough for the singing to happen, though. They're like nature's boombox. Isn't that something? This next one might be the most disturbing of them all. First, you'll see a flash of lightning, then a thundering boom, and finally, a curious light floating through the air and bouncing off surfaces like a white electric ball. Would you also hide under your blanket if you witnessed something like this? That's what an old lady did when she witnessed this from bed in her Chicago apartment. It turns out, people have been swapping their own ball lightning stories for hundreds of years. An English monk's report from the early 1000s might be the oldest version of these accounts. It talks about a fiery globe descending from a storm cloud and falling into the river Thames. The thing is, scientists aren't entirely sure what causes it, but one theory involves lightning striking silica-rich soil. This can vaporize silica, creating tiny particles bound by electrical charges. When these particles react with oxygen, they produce glowing orbs, which can last a few seconds. Some other theories say that it can be linked to miniature black holes, or even hallucinations. But the silica explanation is the best contender so far. What they know for sure is that ball lightning is often linked to stormy weather. If you'd wake up in the middle of a wintry night and saw these lights, you'd probably think otherworldly people were invading our world. Or you'd feel like one of the lucky people who got to see the northern lights during your lifetime. But none are correct. These beautiful shafts of pastel-colored light were photographed by a guy in Ontario, Canada. They happen when tiny, flat ice crystals that usually reside up in the atmosphere float closer to the ground. They're sometimes called columns of violet light, and they reflect light from sources like streetlights or cars. These reflections stretch into tall, colorful columns that look like they're glowing in the sky. The best part is that it's mostly an optical illusion. The pillars aren't really in the air. They're just a trick of light bouncing off the ice. Somewhere near Buffalo, New York, you'll find a surreal combination of the fire and water elements. This phenomenon is called the Eternal Flame Falls, precisely because it never stops burning, even if it's so near the water. This is due to a chemical reaction where gas leaks out of the ground and combusts with the air. It's one out of a few hundred natural eternal flames around the world. But the 30 feet tall waterfall is probably the most beautiful one. Now, how does it get lit the first time around? Usually, eternal flames can be ignited by lightning, human activity, or something called piezoelectricity, which is basically when certain materials make electricity when you squeeze, press, or twist them. Scientists believe that Native Americans lit these flames thousands of years ago, but that's just a hunch. Have you ever imagined going for a midnight swim and suddenly finding yourself surrounded by a glowing blue haze? As if there were huge cannons of light coming out of the seabed directly into the surface. This phenomenon is rare, but it sure is magical. This chemical reaction is known as bioluminescence, and it can happen in different situations. One example is when tiny algae organisms migrate near the seashores. When these algae are disturbed, they try to defend themselves by glowing, and just happen to create the most beautiful spectacle. There's also a specific place in the world where you can see a similar phenomenon. It's in New Zealand. Hidden deep within the country's caves lie the so-called glowworms. They are the larval species of a fungus that happen to be luminescent. If you're lucky enough to tour around these caves, you'll feel like you're floating inside an underground galaxy. The sky can create lots of different cool phenomena, and this specific one is called a crown flash. If you were seeing it with your own eyes, you'd see a column of light jumping or dancing near the top of a cumulus nimbus cloud. Think of cumulus nimbus as massive, towering clouds that look like fluffy mountains. These are the clouds that usually announce thunderstorms, lightning, and heavy rain. Now, although you'd probably think crown flashes looked like some supernatural energetic door opening to the heavens, this is a very scientific phenomenon. It happens when sunlight reflects off tiny ice crystals inside the cloud. But here's the cool part. Those ice crystals aren't just floating around randomly. They're moving because of shifts in the cloud's electric field. As the field changes, the ice crystals realign, and the light they reflect moves too. That's why the crown flash looks like it's flickering or waving. Crown flashes don't happen all the time. You need a thundercloud with the right conditions, lots of sunlight, ice crystals, and a strong electric field. If you ever spot one, consider yourself lucky. It's like nature showing off a rare light trick. We usually see ever-burning hills in sci-fi movies, but this one is real. Located in the Arctic region of Canada, the so-called Smoking Hills is an unmatched sight on our planet. And here, things get even a little science fiction-y, since some minerals that exist in these hills were only ever found in a few places on our planet and outside it, like on the surface of Mars. The ground of Smoking Hills has been releasing smoke for at least a couple hundred years, non-stop. Explorers thought the area was home to an active volcano, but that was not the case. As science explains, the soil in the area is formed by sulfur and coal, and when they're in contact with oxygen, they spontaneously ignite, releasing constant smoke. I just warn you, don't be getting any touristic ideas. The environment is extremely hostile to human life, as the smoke is toxic and its temperatures are dangerously high.
So in Westbrook, Maine, people saw an enormous ice disk in January 2019. This disk was like a wintry carousel. It was spinning away in the Penobscot River. Residents called it everything from an icy lazy Susan to a frozen spinning wheel. It was estimated to be around 300 feet wide, which made it one of the biggest ice disks ever seen. Weirdly, the spinning ice disk notion isn't new. They've shown up in places like Russia and Washington before. They were almost always a perfect circle. So why do they happen? Well, some scientists in 1997 thought it was because river water created a whirlpool effect around a chunk of ice, smoothing it out to be perfectly circular. Yet, in 2016, other scientists claimed that river currents helped these disks get started, but temperature changes kept them twirling. Warmer water makes the ice melt and sink, creating a vortex that keeps the disk spinning. The warmer the water, the faster it spins. Ever heard of the Hestilin lights of Norway? They aren't the same as northern lights. Think of these lights as glowing balls. They have been seen since at least the 1930s. These luminous wonders show up in all sorts of colors and shapes. Sometimes they flicker, and other times they just chill in the air. The Hestilin lights can show up 10 to 20 times a week. They appear both during the day and at night. They can last for just a few seconds or hover for over an hour. Interestingly, nobody has a clue about what exactly they are. The efforts to understand these lights include Project Hestilin, started in 1983, and later projects like the Triangle Project. Despite ongoing research, there's no consensus on the origin of the lights. Some suggested explanations include misperception of celestial bodies, aircraft, or mirages. One theory ties the lights to airborne dust from mining, while another mentions plasma, formed by ionized air and dust during radon decay. Okay. Ringing rocks is a cool geological thing you probably didn't know about, and it's our next stop on the Mysterious Natural Phenomena Tour. You can find them in Bucks County in the U.S. If you give these rocks a hit with a hammer or another rock, they start ringing. Scientists have been studying them, but the mystery remains. There are different hypotheses about this one too. Things like the size and shape of the boulders and how they're stacked can affect the sounds they make. But that alone doesn't give them the ability to ring. Even though the sound is often described as metallic, it's likely because of the rock's density and internal stress, not just its iron content. A scientific experiment from the 1960s suggested that the ringing ability came from some internal stress, not external weathering. The live rocks, found in the middle of boulder fields, showed expansion or relaxation after being cut, indicating internal elastic stresses. A slow weathering rate in dry fields could cause these stresses. The relic stress theory suggests that these boulders act like guitar strings. A de-stressed boulder gives a dull thud, but a stressed one resonates at different frequencies. The boulders can still ring when removed from their fields, leading to myths about stealing them. Most fields are now cleared of smaller ringers, and breaking large boulders stops the ringing. Large equipment is needed to move the remaining small ringers, weighing over a ton. Now let's talk about the Naga fireballs. They only show up along the Mekong River in Asia. These picky fireballs hang out in just a 155-mile stretch of the river. The reddish glowing balls rise naturally from the water into the air. Their scope ranges from small particles to the size of a basketball. The reported number of fireballs varies from tens to thousands per night. They can be spotted all year round, but they seem to go wild during the full moon in late autumn. Why? Well, that's just another one of their little mysteries. Some have tried to explain the phenomenon scientifically. One theory suggests that flammable phosphine gas from the marshy environment could be the cause. However, skeptics argue that spontaneous ignition isn't likely to be the reason. Another scientific explanation involves free-floating plasma orbs created when surface electricity is discharged into a solution. Still, these typically occur in controlled settings during experiments, and not naturally. We can carry on with ball lightning. It's a super rare thing, a glowing ball that shows up in the air. It likes to make an appearance close to the ground during thunderstorms, hanging out with regular lightning. It can be red, orange, yellow, white, or blue, and it's often accompanied by a hissing sound and a funky smell. This flashy sphere of light is a quick show. It lasts just a few seconds, zooming around, and then poof, it's gone, sometimes quietly, sometimes with a little pop. Ball lightning might seem like a troublemaker, but it's usually harmless. Sure, it's been known to burn or melt stuff on occasion, but it's not out to get us. Scientists aren't entirely sure why it happens or how it's related to regular lightning. People have been tossing around ideas like weird air or gas behavior, high-density plasma stuff, or even a vortex of glowing gases. Even microwave radiation trapped in a plasma bubble is on the list. But don't get it confused with bead lightning. That's a different one, more like a string of beads. And it happens when a bolt of lightning sticks around for a good chunk of a second. We're now at the Mapimi Silent Zone. It's this spot near this place in Mexico. The story goes that in this desert patch, you can't pick up any radio signals or talk to anyone. In July 1970, a rocket from Utah went off course and landed here. It was carrying some sort of cobalt. Authorities had to haul away tons of soil from the crash site. Now, thanks to the cleanup, the silent zone is wrapped up in myths. People talk about weird magnetic stuff messing with radios and about plants and critters going through mutations. Well, locals go with it, boosting tourism in the region. Alright, we can now talk a bit about the sun. Well, it's not just a big ball of fire. It's got an outer layer called the corona. Think of it as an invisible sun jacket made of gases. You usually can't see it because the sun is super bright. But there's a trick. During a total solar eclipse, when the moon slides between us and the sun, the corona shows up, all glowing and white. The corona is scorching hot, even hotter than the sun's surface, which is kinda weird. Scientists are on a mission to crack this heat mystery. They found something called heat bombs shooting from the sun into the corona, exploding and warming things up even more. But that might be just one piece of the puzzle. You see, the sun's surface is like a playground covered in magnetic fields. These magnetic fields create cool shapes on the sun, like loops and streamers. Special telescopes help us see these cool patterns up close. The corona stretches way out into space, and from there, it sends out the solar wind that moves through our solar system. Its particles are so speedy that they escape the sun's gravity. So, there's this cool spot called Kuala Sangalore Beach that you can only check out when the tide is low. The timing changes every day, and you can't get there when the tide is high. Most of the time, it's hiding under the sea, not even on the map. But when the tide's just right, bam, it pops up. Kind of like Malaysia's own version of Salar de Uyuni. People call it the mirror of the sky because when it's not underwater, it turns into a giant reflection of the sky. An awesome spot for cool Instapics. Besides being a sweet travel spot, it's also home to a bunch of marine life, like sea and baby clams that live all over the sandy shores. Now, have you ever wondered about the longest time it rained nonstop? Even an hour of rain could be a big deal if you're hanging out in a dry spot like the Atacama Desert in South America. It can set a record for that place. But in super rainy spots like the Amazon rainforest, having 40 days of rain in a row might not even turn heads. Interestingly, we only have rainfall records where people live and keep track. Many towns and cities skip the whole rain data collection thing. Plus, there are so many places on Earth where nobody lives, like rainforests or the open ocean. So our rainfall knowledge is a bit patchy. Now, if we were to talk about records, Hawaii has a couple. People there have some seriously long rainy days, especially on islands where winds come from the mountains. From 1939 to 40, they recorded 331 days in a row with measurable rainfall. If you're a person who likes to watch the rain at home with a cup of tea, this might sound ideal to you. But we need to see the sun at least occasionally. Getting some sun is good for your body and soul. Obviously, you get vitamin D. Just 5 to 15 minutes of sunlight a few times a week can make a real difference. And have you ever heard the phrase sunny disposition? Researchers found that people feel down when there's not much sun around. Sunny days make us happier. Sunshine boosts your serotonin, which fights off bad moods. That sunny serotonin isn't just for your mood, it also helps you sleep. And it's also a heart assistant. When the sun hits your skin, your body releases something called nitric oxide, which chills out your blood pressure. Healthy blood pressure means a healthier heart. Now, go tell that to the people who had to go through 881 consecutive days of rain. Yeah, the record was set almost 3 full years of rain. This happened from 1913 to 1916 in Hononumomaki, Hawaii. It rained like there was no tomorrow because the region is a tropical rainforest. How do clouds make rain? Well, rain happens when damp air goes up into the sky and gets a bit chilly. As this air cools down, tiny water vapor molecules huddle up, forming super small droplets that look like a fluffy cloud team. Now, inside these clouds, things get playful. The air moving around can sometimes make these droplets bump into one another and get bigger. Then they can turn into ice crystals high up in the clouds where it's chilly. These little ice buddies get heavy enough to take a tumble down, melting in the rain on the way to the ground. Now, there isn't just one type of rain. Raindrops can come from all kinds of storms. Thunderstorms show up, make a splash, and then they're out. They can dump a ton of rain in no time. Other storms, like winter storms, are more laid back. They stick around for days and dish out gentle rain or even snow if it's cold enough. Usually, the weather switches between moods. It's nature's way of balancing things out. After stormy weather, the sun comes out, the air dries up, and we get to enjoy some clear skies. But things can get interesting if you're in a place with mountains near the ocean. When moist air hits the mountains, it's forced to climb over them, creating rainfall lasting sometimes for weeks. What if I told you there was a time on Earth when rain fell continuously for 2 million years and completely reshaped the planet's destiny? At the end of the Permian era, around 234 million years ago, I wasn't around then, but I read about it, the Triassic period began, marked by the onset of an extended period of rainfall. This phenomenon is now called the Carnian pluvial event. Well, that's what they decided to call it. Recent studies supported by evidence suggest that it didn't reshape the planet in that sense, and that it was triggered by coal combustion. The rain wasn't continuous either, so we just debunked a myth here. Woohoo! Next, we have columnar jointing. This is the fancy term for groove patterns that form in lava flows, sills, dikes, and other rocky stuff. These lava creations come in all shapes and sizes. Most are seen as straight, parallel columns. Some have curves and varying widths. They can be as high as 1,181 inches. I'll save you the math. It's roughly 98 feet. The columns are formed by pressure and the cooling process. As lava becomes cooler, it shrinks and forms cracks. Once a crack starts, the lava moves around. These cracks expand to the surface of the flow. Water sneaks into the cooling lava, making it chill down fast starting from the surface, leaving its mark in those patterns. Devil's Postpile in California is a must-visit place if you want to see columnar jointing. But hey, they're found all around the world. Let's raise our heads to the sky to see something magical. Fire rainbows, also known as circumhorizontal arcs, look like flames dancing above the clouds. To see these eye-catching arcs, you need a special cloud type called cirrus clouds and the sun at least 58 degrees high in the sky. It's a VIP collaboration between sunlight and clouds. Let's break it down further. Take London, for instance. It's around 51 degrees north. Now, sorry Londoners, no fire rainbows for you. Now we move to deep waters to see underwater crop circles. These are giant circular patterns found in 1995 near the shores of southern Japan. Locals were baffled. They dubbed them mystery circles, as if the ocean had a secret talent for sand art. The mystery was solved in 2011. The unlikely artist turned out to be a tiny pufferfish, just 5 inches long. The researchers found out that males were on a mission, spending a solid 7 to 9 days building their circles by swimming in and out and using their fins to carve valleys into the sandy floor. They decorate the peaks of their creations with bits of shells and corals, turning their sandy canvases into masterpieces. Okay, they don't do it for the sake of art. The curious circles have a purpose. The sandy center of the circle serves as a nest. Male swimming moves mix things up, getting sand particles just where they need to be. When a lady pufferfish swims by, the male twirls and dances, swirling sand around. If she is impressed and thinks he is the one, she lays her eggs in the sandy heart of the circle. There you go, another happy ending. Now let's look at frost flowers. You might have seen thin sheets of ice that look like delicate petals and sometimes pop up from the stems of plants. The ice is about as thick as a credit card. It forms when the weather is cold outside. The soil is damp but not frozen, as well as plant stems. Not all plants produce these frost flowers, and the conditions must be just right. Here's how it happens. The water inside a plant stem gets pulled up from the ground. When it freezes, it expands and cracks the stem vertically. As it hits the chilly air, it turns into ice. As more water gets pulled up through the crack, it keeps pushing out super thin layers of ice. Whether a frost flower looks like a narrow ribbon or a wider one depends on the length of the crack. And the way it curls and shapes itself into these petals is random, or the reason might lie in the difference in friction along the sides of the crack. These frost flowers are unique and delicate, and they don't last long. They melt or just disappear quickly. To spot them, keep an eye out for tall grass, especially in places that don't get mowed much. Pay attention to purple ironweed, blackberries, and wing stems. You're in the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, one of the driest places on Earth. But this desert has a beautiful secret. Every 3 to 5 years, flowers pop up out of nowhere. It's so famous, it's also called the flowering desert. Seeds lie around in the ground just waiting for some rain. When the desert gets enough water, about 200 types of flowers sprout up. The yellow sands of the Atacama turn purple, white, green, and even pink. Another mystical phenomenon that can be seen in the desert is called a sand waterfall. When the wind brings a lot of sand to the edge of the canyon, it begins to fall down. Now amplify this effect 100 times and you get a sand waterfall in Saudi Arabia. It really is like Niagara Falls, only there's not a drop of water. The locals say this phenomenon warns of an impending sandstorm. Fairy rings, also known as elf rings or pixie rings, are mysterious circles of mushrooms that appear in grasslands and forested areas. There's a lot of debate about why these fairy rings form a nearly perfect circle. Some superstitions claim that fairy dances would burn the ground, causing mushrooms to rapidly grow. In southern India, between July and September 2001, people witnessed one of the strangest weather phenomena in recorded history. The rain was red. What many would have thought to be a typical rainstorm left them shocked. The color was bright enough to stain clothes. There were other colors too, such as green, yellow, brown, and even black. In the middle of a monsoon, red rain started to fall, and so did periodically for several weeks. Researchers have found this unusual rain is stained either by dust or algae, so don't try to catch any on your tongue. Scientists aren't entirely sure how the algae got all the way up there. This does make events like this a little unsettling. Now, people who live in rural central Norway over the Hessdalen Valley can often witness floating lights of white, yellow, and red cross the sky. The lights appear both at day and night, and once back in the 80s, the 1980s, they were spotted 15 to 20 times in a single week. The Hessdalen lights can last just a few seconds, but sometimes they can last more than an hour. The lights move, seeming to float or even sway around. Some scientists believe that the reason for these lights is due to ionized iron dust. Others say it's a combination that includes sodium, oxygen, and hydrogen. Many people claim they're just misidentified aircrafts. Norway! Snow donuts are one of the rarest meteorological sights to see, with perfect weather conditions needed just to create them. Found in any snow-covered mountain area, like the Rocky Mountains, the wind, temperature, snow, ice, and moisture all have to work together for us to see these phenomenal rings. A thin layer of wet snow on the ground. Under that layer, ice or powdered snow. Then, a strong enough breeze to roll the donut down a hill, just like a snowball. Once it stops rolling, it can be the size of a baseball or as large as a car tire. It all depends on how strong the wind is. A newly formed snow donut won't stay around for very long, so hurry up with that camera and watch your head. Can you believe there's another place on Earth with its own ecosystem and atmosphere, similar to another planet? Well, start believing. Movil Cave, located in southeastern Romania, remained closed in complete darkness for a whopping 5.5 million years. It wasn't until workers discovered the cave, when they were looking for a place to build, that anyone learned about it. Scientists carved out an opening to the cave and found that a completely sustained ecosystem was thriving inside. As a pathway was carved through the rock past numerous tunnels, scientists found a lake of sulfuric water that stank like rotten eggs. The air was filled with hydrogen sulfide and had 100 times more carbon dioxide than Earth's atmosphere contains. Needless to say, this air is completely toxic. What's even crazier is that a whole ecosystem has been existing in this cave, with 33 species that can't be found anywhere else on Earth. This cave gives us a glimpse of what could possibly exist on other planets with completely different atmospheres. How it managed to exist on Earth all this time without anyone knowing is rather unbelievable, isn't it? Now, check these trees out. They're called Indian rubber trees. Their strong roots grow not underground, but on the surface. With the help of special frames and fasteners, people have learned to control how these roots grow. Let's say a tree is next to a small pit. You need to make a bridge from one end of this pit to the other. You direct the growing tree roots in the needed direction. Over time, the roots penetrate the ground and strengthen under endless downpours. It takes about 15 years to create one bridge. Here's another amazing tree called the Tree of Life. It grows in Bahrain's desert. The tree has been standing on top of this sandy hill for more than 400 years, surrounded by miles of sand. It's extremely hot here and there's no moisture. But despite this, the tree has green leaves and it continues to grow. So far, scientists haven't figured out yet how the tree gets moisture and nutrients. There are only places with oil deposits around. Locals think the tree is sacred. After all, it demonstrates the magic of life and the power of nature. Some experts are sure it's all about the roots. They go so deep that they can reach underground sources of water. So, there you are. You've been driving for hours through the night. You didn't have any chance to sleep, so your mind is hanging by a thread. You stop the car and go out to stretch your limbs. And then you look up into the sky and see a beautiful sunrise. Whoa, wait. There are 3 suns in the sky. You rub your eyes, but nope, there's still 3 bright stars in the sky. No, our home star hasn't been torn into 3 pieces, nor has it been visited by 2 other stars. This is called a sundog. It occurs mostly during severe frosts. Small ice crystals in the sky bend the light. As a result, you may see 3 bright spots in the sky instead of just 1. This phenomenon is officially called a halo. Usually it's just a circle around the sun. You can even see a halo at night, too. Just look at a street lamp and you'll see a bright circle around it. Sometimes, a halo can take on a fancier shape. If there's a lot of ice in the air, the light is warped even more. Just like in a room with a dozen mirrors. Then, the halo can take on the shape of a human eye. Because of this phenomenon, a false dawn can also occur. While you're looking at the horizon, the dawn begins and the edge of the sun appears. A little bit more and wait, the sun starts to just dissolve in the sky. After a few moments, it's dark again. And only a minute later, the real sun shows its face. It was the same light curvature effect you saw before with the 3 suns. Only now, the light is curved vertically, not horizontally. And instead of the real sun, its reflection in ice crystals in the sky appeared. But the sunrise with 3 stars on the horizon is actually real. Not on Earth, though, but 340 light-years away. There's a star system at the center of which lurks a star almost twice the size of the Sun. And there are 2 smaller stars orbiting around this giant. This strange world has a planet, too. Sunsets and dawns there really happen with 3 stars. If you brought your significant other to a park bench to watch a sunset here, your date would go just fine, whatever that means. And since we're talking about the most baffling natural phenomena, it would be a crime not to mention snow in a desert. Yep, in the winter of 2018, the inhabitants of the Sahara Desert, one of the driest and hottest places on this planet, woke up to discover a thick blanket of snow covering the sand. In some places, the layer of snow enveloping the dunes reached a staggering 15 inches. Meteorologists, however, had an explanation for this exciting phenomenon. They stated that cold pools of air, combined with the precipitation from the most recent storm, resulted in a snowfall instead of rain. So, what do you do in that case? Build snow camels? 1 hump or 2.
There's a place on Earth so dangerous that even the most fearsome creatures of today wouldn't last a moment there. It used to exist in what we now call southeastern Morocco, the land called the Kemkem Beds. The story of this place stretches back to the Cretaceous period, about 100 million years ago. It might have looked like a beautiful place at first sight, a lush green forest, rivers glittering in the sun, until you meet some terrifying dinosaur. The lions or sharks of today are nothing compared to what the fossils show us. The Kemkem Beds were dominated by terrifying predators, and above them all, 3 of the largest predatory dinosaurs ever discovered. For example, Spinosaurus. This dinosaur was unlike anything you can imagine. A half reptile, half monster standing over 50 feet tall, bigger than a T-Rex. This hybrid with a crocodile-like snout and a sail on its back hunted the forests. But this dino could dive into the rivers, so not even waters were safe from it. It could catch huge fish, as if plucking them from the shallows. There was also Carcharodontosaurus, a carnivore with the name that literally means shark-toothed lizard. Its razor-sharp teeth could slice through flesh with terrifying ease. This monster stood almost as tall as a house and was faster, stronger, and more aggressive than nearly anything that had ever walked the earth. There was also Deltadromedus, a raptor-like dinosaur built for speed. It was a quick-moving ninja that stalked its prey with horrifying precision. Oh, and the skies were a fun place too, with all these pterosaur creatures flying around. These guys are often mistaken for flying dinosaurs, but they were actually a different kind, more like close cousins of dinosaurs. These majestic reptiles soared above the Kemkem Beds and had wingspans that could stretch up to 30 feet. The fingers were feathery, with a 4th finger kinda like bats. They could glide through the air so easily thanks to their super light skeleton. But it wasn't just the dinosaurs that made the Kemkem Beds so horrifying. The waters also hid their own dark secrets. They were home to giant, terrifying fish and crocodile-like creatures. Their jaws were strong enough to crush bone, and they were lurking beneath the surface, waiting for anything unlucky enough to stumble into their path. One of the river creatures was Sarcosuchus, also called the super croc. Being about 40 feet long, it could easily swallow an adult human. Or better yet, it could take on a full-grown dinosaur and win. Its jaws snapped with unimaginable force, and no creature, not even Spinosaurus, was safe from it. Coelacanths could also hang out in the rivers. It was a monstrous predator that could easily swallow a huge fish whole. They had these creepy, icky fins that moved in a way similar to how human arms and legs move. And they could also kind of raise their heads like humans because of a special joint in their skull. Ew. Fun fact, we thought these monsters had gone extinct 60 million years ago, together with dinosaurs. But recently, we rediscovered them living and thriving in the Indian Ocean. Turns out they were just hiding in the deep waters. They probably didn't even notice the dinosaur asteroid or humans at all. Yay? Don't worry, over millions of years, they became basically harmless. They got 4 to 5 times smaller, even though they still weigh about 200 pounds. Just imagine what they were like back in the day. Kemkem waters were also home to giant lungfish and other creepy aquatic creatures, so you couldn't even drink or take a swim safely without getting bitten by something. Whew, what a place. Even turtles there were the size of cars. Imagine trying to survive in a world where creatures like this are literally everywhere, and I mean everywhere. This place was unique not because huge beasts lived there, but because of the sheer number of predators. You might think, it shouldn't be that easy for all these predators to hang out in one place, right? And you're right. Seems like prey was scarce there. That's even more chilling. All the predators just wandered around, hunting whatever meager life remained. And if there's none, then fighting each other. For years, scientists have wondered why it was the case. Maybe that's just how life was back then, and all corners of Earth were crazy like that. Or is there something special about this place? Some even say that maybe it's just because we only found predators' fossils, while normal friendly animals have disappeared, and that the fossil record might be skewed. But who knows? And the environment itself was just as fascinating as the beasts who lived there, just a bit more friendly. It's hard to imagine, but back in the day, this desert was a green paradise, humid and full of rivers. The heat of the sun scorched the land. The climate was hot, so hot that even the poles were warm. The weather there was extreme. Dry seasons followed by intense storms, which shaped the land and life. The giant rivers carved their way through this landscape. They stretched from the Sahara, emptying into the ancient Tethys Ocean to the north. If you were there, you'd see vast, interconnected basins, and beyond them, the central Atlantic Ocean. The floodplain stretched out beneath a sweltering sky. The rivers were just as wild as local animals, flowing lazily one day, but raging like furious beasts the next. At first, these rivers were powerful, carving deep channels through the land and creating wide sandbanks. But over time, they slowed down, and the landscape changed into shallow ponds and salt-covered flats. As water gradually faded away, it left behind a patchwork of wetlands and slow-moving waters. Right now, the Kem Beds is a vast, rugged desert where time has stood still for millions of years. If you visited it, you'd see a giant escarpment, its rocky face winding along the border of Morocco and Algeria, bathed in the sun's harsh light. Beneath your feet would lie layers of fossilized history. That's one of the reasons why scientists were long fascinated with this place. It must be one of the most comprehensive collections of fossils ever discovered in northern Africa. There are fossils from other parts of Africa, of course, like Egypt's Bahariya Formation. But they don't tell us much about life during this time, not like Kem. That's all because those rivers we mentioned in hotter and drier places, they've eroded or still remain buried under the sand. The first discoveries from Kem began in the late 1940s. A scientist named Schubert uncovered bony fish fossils among the escarpment near the Morocco-Algeria border. Just a few years later, a paleontologist, René Lavocat, took things to the next level. Traveling by camelback, he scoured the desert landscape and uncovered a real treasure trove of fossils. He found the partial skeleton of a massive herbivore dinosaur. Finally, at least one peaceful creature in the Kem Beds. This long-necked giant roamed the ancient river valleys and ate leaves like a good boy. For the next several decades, scientists only did small-scale fossil hunting expeditions to this place. There were modest discoveries made here and there. Then, in the 1970s, German paleontologist Helmut Alberti led his team to the Kem Beds, and that's when things took a wild turn. They uncovered fossils of prehistoric fish, crocodiles, dinosaurs, and pieces of the infamous Spinosaurus. Imagine being one of the scientists on that team. They were probably jumping from excitement. By the mid-1990s, the fossil game changed dramatically. Incredible new species were identified from the Kem Beds. Over the years, the discovery pace has only accelerated. Paleontologists, armed with new tools and techniques, have uncovered more fossils than ever before, and there's only more to come. Hey, don't freak out. Those red waters you see aren't blood oceans. It's just a natural occurrence called the red tide. Red tides often happen in Florida, especially in the West Florida shelf, and they can stick around for weeks or even months. They're basically caused by an increase in algae levels, hence the color. Those algae produce toxins that can be harmful to marine life. They can also be bad news for us humans, causing symptoms like upset stomach and urgent bathroom trips, if you're picking up what I'm putting down. Volcanoes are super scary, but there's nothing scarier than getting taken out by a pyroclastic flow. These fiery flows move crazy fast and reach insane temperatures, like hotter than your oven on a pizza night. They're like a fireworks show of volcanic eruptions filled with ash, lava, and hot gas, speeding down mountains at 50 miles per hour. Some researchers claim they might even hit speeds of 450 miles per hour, almost as fast as a passenger jet. If you're unlucky enough to be in the path of a flow, you're in big trouble. The heat alone can turn you into a human barbecue, even if you try to hide in a building. The air around the flow can reach temperatures high enough to fry your insides, burn your clothes off, and leave metal melted into your skin, which almost sounds like a Marvel origin story. However, a lot of people have met their end because of these flows. But there's one crazy story about a guy named Luger Silbaris, still sounding like an origin story. So on the 7th of May 1902, there was a major eruption on the island of Martinique. The night before, Silbaris had gotten into trouble and ended up in jail. Maybe this is a villain origin story. He'd been locked in a sturdy cell facing away from the volcano. The next morning, Mount Pella unexpectedly erupted, destroying St. Pierre within minutes. The flows wiped out around 30,000 people, but Silbaris survived in his cell and became known as the guy who lived through doomsday. The rescue team found him 4 days later. By the way, the cell still stands today. I hope somebody tested him for superpowers. Back on August 21st, 1986, a guy stumbled upon some animals showing no signs of life on his way to Nios village in Cameroon. To his shock, he later found out that everyone in the village had mysteriously passed away. The same thing happened at Lake Manaun in 1984. Turns out, those tragic incidents were caused by something called limnic eruptions, which are pretty rare disasters where carbon dioxide suddenly bursts out of lake waters, creating a hazardous gas cloud. These type of eruptions usually happen in lakes with high levels of CO2, which can be caused by things like volcanic gases and high pressure. Any little change in temperature or pressure can set off an eruption. So, experts have started looking into ways to safely release CO2 from lakes like Manaun and Nios in order to lower the risk of more disasters in the future. In March 2024, a video captured a terrifying moment of a woman disappearing into a sinkhole while browsing through a Chinese department store. Guess she got more than she bargained for. Ha ha ha. Moving on. The scene unfolded as the floor beneath her gave way, sending her plummeting into the abyss. In the midst of the chaos, another customer frantically ran away before returning to check on the woman who had fallen. Their quick thinking and the swift response of emergency crews and firefighters saved the day, resulting in only minor injuries for both women. I'm glad that lady checked on her because I would be gone. An anvil cloud is basically a big cloud made of ice particles that forms at the top of really tall thunderstorms, or those huge cumulonimbus clouds. The flat top shape is caused by the air rising in the storm and spreading out when it hits the stratosphere. That's why it's called an anvil. It looks like the tool metal workers use. Duh. The air from the anvil cloud is cooler than the stratosphere air, which keeps it from going any higher. You can spot anvil clouds from really far away, sometimes over 100 miles. Often you might see streaks of snow coming from the edge of the cloud known as virga. The snow disappears before hitting the ground because of the dry air. If you notice clouds poking through the flat top or bubbling up, it's an overshooting top, a sign of a super strong storm. Anvils are known for producing dangerous lightning. Normally, lightning comes from the bottom of a storm, but anvil clouds can produce really powerful lightning from the top. This lightning can strike out of nowhere, even from up to 30 miles away. So keep an eye on those anvil clouds if you see one forming nearby. Lahars are no joke. They're basically fast-moving, super dangerous streams of rock, ash, and water that come down the slopes of volcanoes. It's important for everyone to be aware of them. Scientists, policymakers, and even us regular folks. By understanding how lahars work and their potential impact, we can try to stay safe when volcanoes start acting up. Saving lives during natural disasters is the name of the game. There are two main types of lahars: debris lahars and mudflow lahars. Debris lahars are full of solid stuff like rocks and ash, while mudflow lahars are more waterlogged and sludgy. Lahars can be triggered by the rapid melting of snow or ice, heavy rain falling on loose volcanic material, or even a crater-like eruption. The volcano's characteristics and presence of water are key factors in how lahars form and move downhill. When lahars come barreling down mountains at speeds of up to 120 miles per hour, carrying loads of debris, it's a recipe for disaster. Unless you have a surfboard, but I doubt you'll have a surfboard on a volcano. Just saying. Also, it won't work. Going to the beach for a sunny vacation is the best. There's nothing like basking in the sun, feeling sand between your toes, and hearing waves crash against the shore. But even though it's all relaxing and picture perfect, always keep an eye on the water and never turn your back on the ocean. You may know about rip currents and tides, but have you ever heard of square waves? It's a real thing, and it can be pretty scary. Square waves, also known as cross seas, happen when two swells meet, forming a unique square pattern that looks like a checkerboard. They can be found along coastal areas, and while they are rare, they can create waves up to 10 feet high and make it tough for boats and swimmers to maneuver. If you find yourself in the water with square waves, you might feel like you're fighting against two different currents. The best thing to do is to not go too far out to begin with, and get out of the water as soon as the waves become too strong. Square waves are more dangerous for boats and ships, so it's best to stick to the shallow waters and stay safe. Whirlpools and maelstroms are powerful natural forces that have scared sailors for years. They happen when certain weather and current conditions come together just right. Most of them are safe if you stay away, but let's see what they really are and how they form. A whirlpool is basically water that starts spinning when two currents meet, or one current hits something solid like a wall. They can be big or small, depending on the speed of the water and waves. Most aren't dangerous, but there are also maelstroms, which are large, forceful, and violent whirlpools, caused by ocean tides and narrow straits. Tidal currents in places like Norway's Saltstraumen and Moxstraumen can create massive whirlpools. Scotland's Corribrecken whirlpool is one of the world's largest. Other examples of whirlpools can be found in Japan, Canada, and New Zealand. Are they portals? They're definitely not portals. Researchers have recently looked into ancient underwater volcanic eruptions and how they affected Earth's climate. They studied materials from Bronze Age eruptions to learn more about their scale, dangers, and impact on climate. For example, one eruption about 3,600 years ago in the Aegean Sea caused chaos in Santorini. The study focused on this event to understand its importance. By analyzing volcanic deposits, the researchers gained insights into how future eruptions could affect climate. They discovered that sediment waves from shallow underwater eruptions could lead to tsunamis and impact the ocean floor. These findings help us understand how underwater volcanic eruptions relate to the marine environment, which can help us predict climate changes in the future.
A mega drought might hit Australia soon, and this isn't just about a couple of dry seasons. We're talking about 20 years of little or no rain. While Australia could be facing the longest and most devastating drought since official records began, the rest of the world might struggle to buy bread, flour, or cereals. Energy prices are likely to spike globally, and neighboring countries like New Zealand, Indonesia, and Malaysia must be prepared to receive Australians directly affected by the lack of water. To truly understand how severe this situation could become, we should first examine past disasters. First off, Australia is no stranger to droughts, and this phenomenon can happen across their entire territory. From 2017 to 2019, the southeast part of the country went through what they call the tinderbox drought. This was a severe bone-dry event where the cooler months saw only about half the usual rainfall. Parts of Australia became so dry that wildfires were a constant threat. Crops failed, and water was scarce. This drought was also thought to have contributed to the Black Summer fire disaster. By the end of 2019, bushfires were raging across the country on a scale never seen before, with people describing them as rivers of lava flowing down from treetops. The losses were staggering. The tourist industry alone took a hit of $2.8 billion, and over 7,000 jobs disappeared as a result of this difficult period. The tinderbox drought was a big reminder of what Australia might face in the future. That's why it's so important to understand what happened in the past to get a full picture of a possible 20-year mega-drought. But there is one problem. Even though droughts are relatively common in Australia, the rainfall data available until today isn't enough for researchers to predict the future, and our records only go back to around 1900. So experts decided to study tree rings to uncover missing environmental data. If you look at a tree stump, you'll notice concentric rings on its surface. As trees grow, they form new rings, and the thickness of these rings depends on how much water they get. During a mega-drought, the rings appear thinner because the trees don't have much water. Unfortunately, these natural records usually only go back a few hundred years, and it only tells us about specific local conditions, not the situation across all of Australia. So, experts turn to computer models to simulate how Earth's climate changed from the year 850 to 2000. This approach helped them to paint a picture of when mega-droughts might have occurred in Australia and how to predict what might happen in the future. But what they were really interested in was whether the human factor might be making this scenario worse over the years and if we are somehow intensifying these dry periods. So, are we to blame for these mega-droughts? The short answer is, we're not sure yet. On one hand, dry periods in Australia do seem to last longer than they did before factories and machines became common. On the other hand, they don't seem to be getting more intense or happening more often than before industrial times. This means a drought lasting 20 years might not be directly linked to human activities. Actually, this kind of phenomenon is just a normal part of how rainfall changes in Australia over time. This is backed up by evidence from ice cores, which suggests that a 39-year drought hit eastern Australia around 800 years ago. What makes it all so fascinating is that there isn't just one cause for this phenomenon. I mean, there is no single mechanism that explains all cases of megadroughts. It happens because the right combination of ocean and atmospheric conditions come together, and you end up with a drought. And just by random chance, you might have periods where there are 100-year-long droughts. Despite what many people think, mega-droughts are not geographically isolated. They have occurred on every continent except Antarctica over the past 2,000 years, and are often linked to natural events. For instance, mega-droughts in North America and Southwest South America were driven by El Niño, where the Pacific Ocean near the equator gets warmer than usual, disturbing normal weather patterns. They are not rare events either. In fact, the U.S. Southwest has been experiencing a mega-drought since 2000. It's being considered the driest period in 1,200 years for the region. Major reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at low levels. Heat waves are hitting cities like Phoenix and Las Vegas harder than ever, and wildfires are happening more frequently as the land gets drier. Now, let's think about the future. Even though we have a very recent and concrete example from the U.S., research can't exactly predict how a 20-year mega-drought would play out in Australia. Usually, such events show up mainly as reduced rainfall and snowfall. But in most areas, the increase in drought risk will be caused by a warmer, more arid atmosphere. So the ground will probably look parched and cracked, rivers and lakes will likely shrink, and the sky will be relentlessly clear and blue, with barely a cloud in sight. Farmers might struggle to grow crops, making grocery prices rise worldwide. Things like bread, flour, and cereals may become scarcer, as Australia supplies about 13% of global wheat exports. Coal mines might be affected, as they depend on water for extraction, washing, and processing. That might drive up power costs for industries around the world, which could be passed on to consumers, impacting global growth and inflation. As cities might face water shortages, Australians will likely find new ways to conserve every drop or maybe move to New Zealand or Southeast Asia. Now, you're probably thinking, when is this big event going to happen? Honestly, it's really hard to predict exactly. Megadroughts can happen every 150 to 1,000 years, but experts think Australia should be ready for one to happen in the next 10 years or so. And this possibly should be taken seriously. This phenomenon has been known to contribute to the collapse of entire civilizations. Take the Akkadians of Mesopotamia, who built the world's first empire more than 4,000 years ago. Studies of moisture at the ruins of Akkadian cities suggest that they experienced a massive drought lasting 300 years, and this may have led to their collapse. A similar thing happened to the Assyrian Empire, which existed over 2,700 years ago, in what is now northern Iraq. For years, it was a real mystery why they left their capital of Nineveh and never returned. But recent studies of a stalagmite in the Cunaba cave revealed that the rise and fall of the empire coincided with a wet period followed by a 125-year-long mega-drought. Because they were very dependent on seasonal rain for agriculture, this dry period made their life much harder. Even though experts now believe they probably left because of the dryness, the question of where they went is still a mystery. So, yep, mega-droughts may have played a role in the collapse of great civilizations in the past. But on the positive side, we've come a long way since then, and recent climate technologies can help us prepare for events like this. Now that we know a 20-year mega-drought is very much possible and might happen soon, Australia has some time to get ready for it. Developing strong water management plans to mitigate the severe impacts of a mega-drought is more than necessary, and it's also important to create community support networks to provide emotional and financial support to people, particularly farmers, who are more affected directly by this event. If initiatives like these emerge in the coming years, those 20 years of drought could be less intense than most people might expect. If all the volcanoes on Earth suddenly erupted together, it'd be loud. We'd also have around 1,500 of these formations bursting at once. Now normally it's just 10 to 20 volcanoes that are active each day. But what would the world look like if they all blew their tops simultaneously? Geologists think it wouldn't be pretty. Even if only the land volcanoes erupted together, it would set off a chain reaction way worse than anything we've ever seen before. The two big problems would be ash and volcanic gases. While the explosions in lava would be damaging for people nearby, the real danger lies in what happens next. A thick layer of ash would cover the planet, blocking out sunlight completely. No sunlight means no photosynthesis, which means crops would fade away and temperatures would drop considerably. And all this ash cloud could remain in our atmosphere for up to 10 years. Now, ash aside, there's also acid rain to worry about. Volcanic gases like hydrochloric acid and sulfur dioxide would mix with the atmosphere and fall back down as acid rain. This type of weather would harm the groundwater and ocean surfaces. Even if humans would find a way to survive up to this point, we'd have no corals and no other sea creatures around. Scientists have seen similar events in Earth's history at a smaller scale. Big volcanic eruptions have been linked to mass extinctions. When Mount Pinatubo erupted in 1991, it cooled parts of the world for 2 years. But the extra carbon dioxide from these eruptions could also heat the planet, the same way we turn our stoves to broil for that extra crispy layer on our casserole. Geologists also mentioned that there's evidence in our atmosphere that stuff like this may have happened in the distant past. During the Cretaceous period, carbon dioxide levels were way higher than today, which made it difficult for marine life to thrive. Who would survive all this? Probably just some extremophiles, these organisms that survive in harsh conditions like hot springs or deep undersea vents. As for humans, we could all lay low in underground bunkers until things clear up, or build multiple space stations that could fit us all. Yeah, right. The chances of all volcanoes erupting at once, though, are very slim. Whew! That's because there isn't one giant source supplying all the volcanoes on Earth. Each one of these openings has its own deposit of magma, except for a few cases where they indeed share the supply. For example, in 1912, Nova Rupta in Alaska erupted alongside another volcano sharing magma. Scientists have also found evidence of magma hiding under volcanic areas, like under the Taupau volcanic zone in New Zealand. This magma can spread out horizontally for long distances, but is still just a local feature. Even if we consider all the magma under Taupau as one system, it's not connected to other volcanic areas like Indonesia or the Philippines. Because the great majority are isolated, volcanoes can't sync up to erupt at once. The magma comes from different processes like mantle decompression or adding water to the mantle through subduction. There's no way to make all these different volcanoes erupt together because of how tectonics work. Now, that doesn't mean we won't see interesting volcano activity in the future. Take an underwater area near British Columbia, where recently about 200 small earthquakes per hour have been noted. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean floor, off the coast of Vancouver Island, magma is set to erupt, heating the water so much that it'll bubble like soda. However, this event will likely go unnoticed by anyone other than scientists. The anticipated eruption will most likely happen around 3 miles below the ocean surface. Scientists explain that the earthquakes range from negative to 4.1 magnitude, meaning only those nearby would feel any tremors. This unusual activity gives us a rare opportunity to study how the Earth's crust forms. The magma beneath the ocean floor is estimated to be almost 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, but will cool rapidly upon eruption and contact with water. This runny rock will solidify upon contact with the seafloor, turning black quickly. This event will be useful for biologists too, who will have the opportunity to study the marine animals' response to any changes, like run! Antarctica, often seen as a vast icy continent, also holds a volcanic surprise beneath its frozen surface. Researchers have identified over 130 under the western ice sheet alone, making it the largest volcanic region on Earth. Most of these volcanoes, about 90, were only recently discovered in 2017. But could any of these Antarctic volcanoes actually erupt? Well, it depends on which volcano we're talking about. While these formations are relatively young in geologic terms, it's hard for scientists to tell if they're still active or not. There are only 2 confirmed active volcanoes in Antarctica, Deception Island and Mount Erebus. The latter, standing tall as the highest peak on the continent, has been continuously erupting since at least 1972. It's known for emitting gas and steam, and sometimes even throwing out rocks in what are called strombolian eruptions. One of its most notable features is a persistent lava lake in its crater, a rare phenomenon due to specific conditions needed to keep the surface molten. For instance, it's fueled by a steady supply of magma from deep within the Earth's mantle. This continuous inflow of molten rock provides the material for the lava lake to exist. It also features low ambient temperatures. Despite its location in Antarctica, Erebus has relatively mild temperatures in its summit region because of the heat generated by the volcanic activity. This allows the lava lake to remain liquid rather than freezing over. Deception Island, another active volcano, last erupted in the 70s. While it's currently not showing signs of imminent eruption, it's being monitored closely for any concerning activity. Apart from these 2 being confirmed to be active, Antarctica is dotted with fumaroles, openings in the Earth's crust that release gases and vapors. Sometimes these fumaroles can create icy towers reaching heights of 10 feet. What we should focus on is maybe supervolcanoes. They're this type that has the potential to produce the most massive and destructive eruptions. Unlike the typical one, which has a single vent, supervolcanoes have a vast magma chamber beneath the surface, spanning tens or even hundreds of miles in diameter. Their eruptions can have catastrophic effects on the surrounding area and even impact global climate patterns because of the amounts of ash and gases they spill out into the atmosphere. One famous supervolcano is the Yellowstone one, which some say is gearing up for another eruption. It has the capacity to unleash a colossal eruption, spewing over 240 cubic miles of material. As much as we'd like to predict its behavior, volcanoes don't stick to a calendar. On the contrary, eruptions simply happen when there's enough magma beneath the surface. There also needs to be enough pressure for the magma to travel upwards. As far as we can measure, these conditions are not currently met at Yellowstone. Sure, many volcanoes operate on a cyclical pattern, but that doesn't mean Yellowstone is overdue. In fact, Yellowstone has had just 3 major eruptions over the past 2.1 million years. Also, the term supervolcano refers to the formation's size, not necessarily how fussy it is. Yellowstone's monitoring is extensive, tracking seismicity, ground deformation, thermal emissions, gas, water chemistry, and surface changes. Signs of an eruption would include thousands of earthquakes over a short period. We'd also see deformation on the ground and weird gas emissions ahead of time. Stable as it might look like for now, the consequences of it having a major eruption could look ugly. Ash dispersion could blanket a 500-mile radius, potentially disrupting Midwest agriculture and clogging waterways. Ash and gas emissions into the stratosphere could induce global climatic effects, making our planet colder for several years. And yes, we've seen some research that it shows there's more liquid molten rock under the Yellowstone volcano than scientists believe. But that doesn't translate to imminent danger. So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas fault line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas fault line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tajon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something that can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas Fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas Fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas Fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put 2 and 2 together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe. So, the Sahara Desert is so big that it covers 8% of the world's territory. It's bigger than the USA or China. Surprisingly, the Sahara is not the largest desert in the world. It is the 3rd largest, behind Antarctica and the Arctic. But it is definitely the hottest one. Temperatures there reach 136 degrees Fahrenheit. This place has some of the most incredible sand dunes you've ever seen, towering up to 1,476 feet. But here's the kicker. There's a real risk that these dunes might continue to spread until they cover the entire world. Surprisingly, the influence of the Sahara Desert extends far beyond its borders. Its dust, carried by powerful winds, makes its way to the UK and across the European continent, particularly in winter. This dust, settling on the ground where it rains, is a familiar sight to those in the UK, often leaving a red residue on cars. This connection between the Sahara, England, and Europe serves as a stark reminder of the global reach of environmental phenomena. You might think this is not a big deal, but it could turn Europe into a desert, leaving its soil infertile and Europeans with no food. Soil is a fundamental aspect of human existence, just as crucial as clean water and air. Without it, we're left with nothing but a bleak and barren landscape. The Sahara Desert has already made its jump across the Mediterranean Sea, which is concerning and could change the landscape forever. 1/5 of Spain has already turned into a desert. The next victim is Italy, which also faces the problem of desertification. In fact, almost all European countries have the same issue. According to an expert, the land that has not changed for nearly 2,000 years will become mostly rock, and people living on this land will be gone. 60% of the soil in Moldova is gone, and the problem has expanded beyond the Black Sea. It has reached China and Mongolia, thousands of miles away from the Sahara Desert. All of this causes losses of $4 billion a year. The threat is so significant that even the UN has gathered the necessary resources to solve the problem as soon as possible. Italy is sending help to Africa to stop the Sahara Desert from expanding. If this process does not stop in the next 10 years, millions will be forced to leave their homes. The Sahara Desert is growing for approximately 30 miles per decade. You do the math and see how long it will take to cover Europe. Since 1920, the Sahara has expanded by around 10%. But not all hope is lost because more than 172 countries have joined to put a stop to the desertification of the world. The World Food Program is a project that aims to help bring back green land that was once present in the Sahara. When they told people who called the Sahara home what they were about to do, the latter basically laughed in their faces and said it was impossible. But when you have a specific goal in mind, the impossible becomes possible. If we traveled back around 5,000 years into the past, we would see a beautiful forest with lush green trees and grass. Africa's climate has been changing for 21,000 years, from fantastic greenery to uninhabitable deserts. This has to do with Earth's rotation and the monsoons that bring water to this dry continent. But with the help of scientists and some clever tricks, we can bring the greenery back and stop the Sahara in its tracks. The Senegal River serves as a border between the Sahara Desert, Senegal City, and Mauritania. When you look at this area from space, you'll see how the desert is expanding to Senegal because the vegetation along the riverbank is almost non-existent. Forests can serve as a barrier, stopping the sand from getting blown away and the desert from expanding. An effort to create a great green wall is being made, and how they do it is actually quite impressive. Nothing has been growing in the currently restored area for more than 40 years, making locals find other places to call home. People were thrilled when they saw that the land could be restored. They're very committed and learn to work with the soil and grow food. At the same moment, more than 30,000 hectares have been restored and transformed into lush greenery. The Sahel region is the starting point of desertification, and it is crucial to establish a green wall in that area first. To make this wall is not rocket science, since it only takes a few simple steps. The ground there is baked by the sun and as hard as a block of concrete. If you've ever poured water on concrete, you know that it just flows away. It doesn't stay in one place. So they had to create water-retaining half-moons that would hold the water and make it available to plants. When you learn about how these half-moons work, you might say, how did they not think of that sooner? Actually, this technique is ancient, and it was once implemented in Sahel. but it was lost over time. When the rain falls, the water is collected into the half-moons that are positioned a bit lower than the ground below contour lines. There is also a kind of bank at the end of the shape that prevents water from overflowing. And in the middle, there are plants that are happy because they have plenty of water to thrive. Also, it's essential to grow native plants that are kind of used to harsh conditions, like sorghum and millet. These plants have been surviving there for thousands of years and produce a good amount of biomass, which means the land can be rehabilitated faster and people will have food sooner. The water that will enter the half-moons won't be lost. It will penetrate the ground and top off underground waters. This will ensure the ground that H2O will never run out and that future generations will have usable aqua. This brilliant planting technique is not limited to half-moons. People also create lines and plant various vegetables, such as tomatoes. Next, there are places only for trees, like lemons or oranges. After a long hot day, nothing is better than a freshly made cold lemonade. The trees will also protect the soil, and with some luck, there will be a new forest in the Sahara Desert. The goal is to copy the forest dynamic. Start with small plants and gradually expand to bigger plants that are more useful than the tiny ones. They are aiming to plant more than 10,000 trees. Right now, many people are leaving the Sahara after the rainy season, going to cities or leaving Africa altogether. At this time of year, villages are like ghost towns. Only animals can be found there. Most people are gone. I mean, who would blame them? Nobody wants to live in the sand where nothing grows. Luckily, with all this new, old technology being developed, many people are slowly but surely returning to their land and starting to work in agriculture. The best thing is that there are no brutal winters, so plants grow 12 months a year, and people can always have food. People are becoming more social because now everybody stays in their villages and doesn't travel much. If this project works out, Africa will be saved, and the world won't turn into a giant desert.
It was the largest fish our Earth had ever seen, and its bite was strong enough to crush a car. The largest of its teeth found was the length of a remote control. It consumed about 2,500 pounds of food a day. That's like 3,300 cans of tuna for you. The earliest megalodon fossils are from about 20 million years ago. But you won't see its skeleton, and that's because the mighty Meg had no bones. A skeleton made from bones gives most animals their body shape and strength. Sharks, though, come from the same subclass as rays, skates, and sawfish and have cartilage instead of bones. Cartilage is a tissue that is softer and more flexible than bones, but it's still tough enough to shape the body and protect the internal organs. Some areas are more flexible, since cartilage is weaker, and some, like the shark's head, are much tougher thanks to calcified cartilage. Their snouts, though, are made of really soft and flexible cartilage to work like a bumper in case of a collision with some dangers. Who knows if they'd be able to do all this with a heavy skeleton? Plus, cartilage makes their jaws more flexible, and they can open their mouths much wider than they would with a jaw made of bone. Our hero, Meg, was no exception, and it had the strongest bite of all living creatures, which was also made possible by a skeleton made of cartilage. Sharks take full advantage of their cartilage. It helps them swim and turn fast while hunting. One drawback of this type of skeleton is that it was really tricky for scientists to establish the shape and size of Meg. Normally, they would do it using fossilized bone skeletons or their parts. With Meg, they had to guess based on the teeth they found and comparisons with living relatives. A more recent 3D computer model was based partially on scans of a preserved spine discovered in the 1860s. The model showed that Meg was bigger, faster, and even hungrier than scientists had previously thought. Looks like an average megalodon was 52 feet long. That's slightly bigger than the height of the Hollywood sign and weighed 10 times as heavy as an elephant. There were also much bigger creatures. Scientists still aren't sure how the megalodon got this size. The fact that there were bigger and smaller Megs probably has to do with a little something called Bergmann's rule. It says that the temperature of the surrounding environment affects the animal's body size because they either need to conserve or shed heat. The megalodons that reached cooler waters probably needed more body weight to make sure they survived in low temperatures. Those living in warmer waters had to be smaller to avoid burning up. If the researchers were correct in their calculations, it also means that Meg reached a cruising speed of over 3 miles per hour, which is much faster than other sharks. The still-living great white shark can cover a distance of nearly 7,000 miles without stopping, which is 9/10 as long as the diameter of Earth. It looks like the megalodon could have gone much further. Megalodons managed to survive on our planet for nearly 70 times longer than humans have. They were roaming the oceans for around 20 million years, and you could see them pretty much anywhere except near the poles. Scientists discovered the most northern fossils off the coast of Denmark and the most southern in New Zealand. The reason why there were no megalodon teeth found in Antarctica is most likely that these adapted to only warm tropical and subtropical waters. The younger ones like to keep to the shores, while full-grown adults preferred coastal areas, but they could easily move into the open ocean as well. When our planet went through a period of global cooling and drying, and the seas began to freeze around 3.6 million years ago, there was less and less room for Meg to thrive. Much of their prey, like smaller whales, seals, and sea turtles, disappeared or relocated to waters that were too cold for our hero. And at the same time, the number of its natural competitors, like smaller predatory sharks, like the great white shark, and whales, increased. This shifting food chain dynamics could have been even more dangerous for the Meg than the cold ocean water. You're used to seeing them on the big screen as heartless monsters, but these huge sharks were actually loving and caring family guys. Scientists discovered several megalodon nursery areas in Florida, Maryland, Panama, and off the coast of Spain. It looks like they gave birth to their young in shallow water environments. Then, little Megs would stay there with adults protecting and raising them until they were ready to fight off predators. The mighty Meg had 276 teeth in 5 rows in its mouth. Similar to other sharks, it was fast in replacing its worn-out or lost teeth. With 4 or 5 rows of teeth in its mouth, it basically acted like a conveyor belt, able to grow back damaged or missing teeth. This means that an adult megalodon probably would have grown several thousand teeth throughout its lifetime. Although the great white shark is often mentioned as Meg's closest relative, they'd hardly be distant cousins. The ancestors of today's great white existed at the same time as the Meg, but they weren't best friends and even rivaled each other. The great white shark wouldn't win in a head-to-head fight with a Meg, but it was a better hunter using its smaller size and agility to snap up the giant's prey quickly. This only left the bigger fish and whales for the Meg, but its food supplies began to run out as the whales swam to the cooler new seas. Rather than a great white, the megalodon is more like a modern bull shark. It had a short snout, a flat lower jaw, and huge pectoral fins to support its massive weight and size. We also speak of Meg as an extinct giant, but can we be 100% sure it isn't hiding somewhere as we speak? After all, we've only explored 5% of our oceans altogether. The Mariana Trench is the deepest oceanic trench on Earth, and you could dip the whole of Mount Everest in its deepest part, and over a mile of it would still be above the surface. If a megalodon or two needed a place to hide, that would be the perfect spot. It wouldn't be the coziest place to live, though, with its cold water and total darkness. Plus, the pressure there is 1,000 times stronger than at sea level. So, if a Meg really were hiding down there, it would have serious issues with its teeth, because calcium would dissolve under that pressure. To survive here, it would also need to learn to navigate in complete darkness. That means it would have either become bioluminescent or evolve to grow massive eyes like the giant squid. If the Meg were still around and true to its dietary choices, it would have to eat smaller fish, and that would be a problem for us humans. Especially those of us who love fish, that is. And the ocean isn't cooling down these days. The megalodon would love its temperature and would thrive and reproduce faster than ever. Those giants would create some massive problems for cargo ships and cruising vessels. In case you're now scared at the thought of meeting a megalodon, relax. Most scientists don't think it's possible because of our hero's size. Most foods that megalodons like to eat live in shallow ocean areas and not in the deep, deep sea. Meg would need to come up for dinner every now and then, and it's kinda hard to miss a creature this big. They're both giant prehistoric creatures to us, but the megalodons and the dinosaurs never actually coexisted. The dinosaurs probably died out about 66 million years ago. Megalodons seem to have appeared a bit later. We are up for a crazy Atlantic hurricane season. It may be even worse than that of 2005, the year that brought us Hurricane Katrina. That one took 1,392 lives and cost the country over $100 billion. Experts predict there will be between 17 to 25 total named storms. Some of these storms are about to become hurricanes, with winds reaching over 100 miles per hour or higher. We're already seeing storms sweep across the country, bringing dangers like tornadoes, flooding, and hail. You gotta thank the El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, for this. This complicated term has to do with El Niño and La Niña, the two giant forces that basically shape our world. Normally, winds in the Pacific Ocean blow west along the equator, moving warm water from South America towards Asia. This warm water is replaced by cold water rising from the depths of the Pacific. But during El Niño and La Niña, this usual pattern is messed up. El Niño is the warm phase of the ENSO cycle. During El Niño, the equatorial winds weaken, causing warm water to shift back towards the west coast of the Americas. This means less cold water rises to the surface. The weather in northern parts of the US and Canada become drier and warmer because of it. But there are wetter conditions in southern states. In the Atlantic, El Niño weakens hurricane seasons, and it ramps up hurricane activity in the central and eastern Pacific. In Africa, it brings more rain to East Africa but less to southern Africa, West Africa, and parts of the Sahara. La Niña is the cold phase of the ENSO cycle. During this phase, the westward winds along the equator in the Pacific are stronger than usual, and they push more warm water towards Asia. And because of it, colder, nutrient-rich water rises to the surface along the Americas' west coast. These colder Pacific waters push the jet stream northward, giving us drier weather in the southern US, but wetter and colder conditions in the Pacific Northwest and Canada. La Niña also brings warmer winters to the southern US and cooler than normal temperatures to the north. La Niña usually calms hurricane activity in the Pacific, but intensifies it in the Atlantic. In 2023, El Niño was in charge, and it took most storms up before they got to the US. But this year, we've switched to La Niña, and this lady brings us colder water in the Pacific and a pattern that lets storms move a little farther west and reach the Caribbean. And when they get there, they can easily move into the Gulf and affect Florida and other states. The upcoming intense Atlantic hurricane season also has to do with a strong monsoon season in West Africa. It creates moisture and waves off Africa's coast and can travel along the Atlantic and spur hurricanes. The Atlantic hurricane season runs from the 1st of June to the 30th of November, and most activity happens between mid-August and mid-October. Since the 1950s, tropical cyclones have been given names to make it easier for meteorologists to inform the public about them. You're more likely to remember that Leslie is coming than Hurricane X34D is on the way, right? So there are 20 names on the alphabetical list this year, from Alberto to Beryl to Valerie and William. Let's hope it won't get as terrible as the Galveston hurricane. The most fatal natural disaster in U.S. history hit Texas in the year 1900. A Category 4 hurricane smashed into Galveston, demolishing over 3,600 buildings with winds over 135 miles per hour. It took the lives of between 6,000 and 12,000 people. One of the reasons it became so fatal was poor communication policy. Days before the disaster, it was clear to a professional weather forecaster that the storm was moving west. But the Weather Bureau in Washington predicted it would go over Florida and up to New England, which was way off. The Bureau was just 10 years old then, so hurricane science in the US wasn't very advanced. Cuban scientists were excellent at tracking storms because their region is so prone to them. So they knew it was heading towards the Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, the director of the Weather Bureau was so jealous that the Cuban forecasters were better than the American ones that he cut off the flow of information from Cuba and made it difficult for local forecasters to issue warnings without going through Washington. In the days before the storm hit, the chief observer in Galveston began to suspect that Washington's forecast was wrong and tried to warn the city, but it was too late. The hurricane left Galveston in ruins. After this hurricane, the Weather Bureau started improving communication, both internationally and within the US. The officials in charge are doing everything possible to improve forecasts, support the people, and help the affected areas recover more easily after the hurricanes hit. They're going to try new forecast models to predict tropical cyclones getting stronger, help emergency and water managers prepare for potential flooding, and protect people and infrastructure. Coastal weather buoys in the tropical Western Atlantic and Caribbean have been upgraded, and new drifters and sail drones, underwater gliders, and a lightweight drop sonde will provide real-time data. There are also some things you can do to ensure your safety before, during, and after a hurricane. If you live in a hurricane-prone area, Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, you must always be prepared before the high storm season. Make up a family disaster plan that will outline your actions during an emergency. Map out several evacuation routes in case your primary one is blocked, and decide on a meeting place if you get separated. You can arrange drills to teach family members how to shut off water, gas, and electricity, and even make sure the youngest knows how to call emergency services. Pack a disaster kit that will be ready to go at a moment's notice. It should include essentials like food, water, a first aid kit, and flashlights to last at least 72 hours on your own. You can buy a generator to make sure you have electricity in case of a power outage until the power returns. Keep it in a secure place, away from rain and rising water, with proper ventilation. You're also going to need self-powered radios and flashlights. If you can, add a safe room to your house that's strengthened to withstand high winds with reinforced concrete ceiling, floor, and walls. Make sure you have enough canned and non-perishable food and bottled water for at least 3 days. When the storm is about to hit, head north to get away from it, where it will be much weaker by the time it gets there. It's much safer to keep your family and pets together away from the storm than trying to ride it out at home. Try to go in one car if possible. Always follow local evacuation orders, especially if you're in a mobile home. Fill up your gas tank and give yourself plenty of time to get out. Never leave your pets behind. Debris, floodwaters, or flying objects can be dangerous for them. If you're staying put during a storm, you need a safe spot for you, your family, and your pets. This place shouldn't have any windows or skylights. If you're hiding at home, close all interior doors and secure the exterior ones. Quickly find an interior room with strong walls and no windows, like a bathroom or closet. If your home isn't safe, look for a community shelter. Get to your shelter at least 2 hours before the storm hits so it doesn't catch you outside. Bring a battery-powered radio with extra batteries for updates every 15 to 30 minutes. Never leave your shelter even if it seems calm, as conditions can get worse quickly, especially if you're in the eye of the storm. For extra protection, lie on the floor under something sturdy like a table. Don't use electric appliances, phones, or showers during the storm. Don't leave your shelter until you get the official all clear from the authorities. Be careful. There will be many hazards outside. The latest super eruption of Yellowstone occurred 640,000 years ago, and it was long before Homo sapiens saw the light of day. But we were around during another, no less devastating natural disaster. This super eruption took place on the island of Sumatra around 74,000 years ago. That's when an erupting supervolcano wreaked havoc on huge territories, sending up plumes of debris and ash that spread for thousands of miles and caused temperatures on the planet to plummet. The effects of this super eruption were visible as far away as southern Africa. Experts believe they could have impacted early humans there. By the time the volcano erupted, our ancestors had already been using stone tools and had likely known how to produce yarn. And some specialists even think that the Toba super eruption was so powerful it could push our ancestors to the brink of extinction. They claim that Toba might be the largest volcanic eruption to occur on Earth within the last 2 million years. The eruption disgorged so much pyroclastic rock it would be enough to cover the entire United States to the depth of a one-story house. About a third of that deposit piled up on northern Sumatra, while a lot more ended up beneath the floor of the Indian Ocean. The super eruption left an elliptical crater lake around 60 miles long. The caldera is so large it's hard to feel that you're indeed in a volcano. Pumice deposits from the eruption remain in the canyon walls and go deep below the ground. There aren't many arguments about the amount of pumice and ash involved in this disaster. At the same time, experts aren't sure how much sulfur ended up in the atmosphere. Even some sulfur layers in the polar ice could be potential candidates. But so far, scientists haven't found any connection between them and Toba. But let's get back to the dramatic impact the super eruption had on early humans. It turns out some not only survived but even thrived after this natural catastrophe, at least judging by the artifacts they made during and after the eruption. The disaster might not have posed a serious threat to those of our ancestors who took refuge along the coast. Genetic evidence hints that modern humans descend from a few thousand people that ventured out of Africa around 60,000 years ago. Why just a few thousand? According to some experts, the rest of our ancestors could have been devastated by the Toba eruption. After all, the supervolcano spewed out 1,000 cubic miles of dust and rock in a flash, leaving a scar in the ground that was dozens of miles wide. All that dust and sulfur Toba sent into the atmosphere potentially cooled the surface of our planet, which led to the appearance of glaciers and the lowering of Earth's sea levels. And since Toba might have had an important role in shaping humankind, scientists have been working hard trying to understand precisely how early humans reacted to this disaster. In 2011, several researchers found an enigmatic soil sample in South Africa's Pinnacle Point, an archaeological site overlooking the Indian Ocean. This sample contained some volcanic ash. After examining the layer, they found more than 400,000 artifacts left by early humans. Those ranged from heat-treated stone tools to signs of fire and animal bones. Based on this finding, the team suggested that early humans on the South African coast thrived after the eruption, living in that area for thousands of years and improving their tools. The region might have served as a refuge during and after the Toba eruption. A 2009 study suggested that the eruption could have lowered global temperatures by 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It would have made survival tough elsewhere in Africa. If there had been a volcanic winter, it wouldn't have been as cold along the coastline. On the other hand, newer studies claim that Toba spewed out so much sulfur into the atmosphere that the resulting aerosols could have stuck together, which would have limited their cooling effect in the long term. In other words, right after the eruption, temperatures would have plummeted, but only in some regions. And after 3 years or so, the effects of the eruptions would have calmed down altogether, becoming not dangerous to humans. Well, apparently, more research is needed. Meanwhile, let's figure out if we should watch out for any volcanoes these days. Last year, thousands of small earthquakes shook the ground near Iceland's Svartsengi geothermal power plant. Magma rose to the surface there, and now it has opened wide fractures slicing through the small town of Grindavik. The ground there is still swelling, and an eruption might happen with little notice. But of course, that's not all. Over the planet, 45 other volcanoes keep rumbling. For example, Italy's Vesuvius, that infamous thing that finished the city of Pompeii in 79 CE. Over the last 17,000 years, the volcano has experienced 8 explosive eruptions, followed by powerful pyroclastic flows, dense masses of super hot ash, lava fragments, and gases flowing at high speeds. The volcano's last eruption happened in 1944. Mount Rainier is one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the USA. Its high elevation, chemical composition, and proximity to Washington's Seattle and Tacoma suburbs, and the volcano's ability to produce massive pyroclastic flows make Mount Rainier a threat to consider. The heat from this volcano could potentially melt the ice and snow covering it, leading to rapid downstream flows of debris, mud, and rocks. The Novarupta volcano in Alaska's Katmai National Park and Reserve formed in a 1912 eruption, which was the world's largest in the 20th century. The volcano sent almost 7 cubic miles of ash and debris into the air. It also produced such a powerful ash flow that it created the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. Mount Pinatubo is located in a populated region in the Philippines. It became notorious after a 1991 massive eruption, which was the second largest eruption of the 20th century. More than 700 people lost their lives during that natural disaster. Today, more than 21 million people live within 62 miles of Pinatubo. Mount Agun, a continuously erupting volcano in Indonesia, had its last major eruption in 1963. It was one of the most tragic eruptions in the country's history. It lasted for 11 months, producing ashfall and pyroclastic flows that led to the loss of more than 1,000 lives and serious property damage. People saw ash plumes above the volcano throughout 2018, following the eruption in November 2017. Japan's Mount Fuji hasn't erupted since 1707. That year, a massive earthquake likely set it off. In 2014, experts warned that Fuji could be at risk of another eruption following the 9-magnitude earthquake that shook Japan in 2011. Experts believed the earthquake had raised pressure below Fuji. The eruption in 1707 sent so much ash and debris into the air that all this mass even reached Tokyo. Should Fuji erupt again, it would affect more than 25 million people in the surrounding areas. The eruption of Washington's Mount St. Helens in 1980 was one of the most destructive volcanic events in U.S. history. 57 people, as well as thousands of animals, lost their lives during that natural disaster. The eruption also destroyed around 200 square miles of forest. Experts think that Mount St. Helens' history of massive eruptions means that future catastrophes are bound to happen. The next explosive eruption might send large amounts of ash all over the Pacific Northwest. No wonder the volcano is under close monitoring. One of Indonesia's most active volcanoes, Mount Merapi, has been erupting for centuries. NASA claims that the biggest risk of this volcano is pyroclastic flows, which can spread over vast areas and harm loads of people. For the last time, Merapi erupted in January 2024, sending plumes of smoke into the air. These days, more than 24 million people live in the area surrounding this volcano.
Today, I'm going to tell you about creatures that had unique features which allowed them to grow to incredible sizes. They were some of the most impressive animals to have ever existed on our planet. The Argentinosaurus is a genus of sauropod dinosaurs that lived approximately 97 million years ago in what is now South America. Scientists think it was one of the largest land animals ever, with a length of up to 100 feet and a weight of up to 100 tons. A farmer stumbled upon a giant leg bone while tending his cattle. That's how he discovered the first fossils of the Argentinosaurus in Argentina in 1987. Further excavations uncovered more bones, revealing a massive dinosaur that would have dwarfed most other animals of its time. The Spinosaurus, meaning spine lizard, is a genus of theropod dinosaur that lived around 97 million years ago in what is now North Africa. It is believed to be one of the largest carnivorous dinosaurs to ever exist, with a length of up to 60 feet and a weight of up to 23 tons. The Spinosaurus is known for its distinctive elongated sail-like structure on its back. It was likely used for thermoregulation. It also had long crocodile-like jaws that were lined with sharp teeth. This allowed the creature to catch and eat large prey, such as fish, crocodiles, and other dinosaurs. The first fossils of the Spinosaurus were discovered in Egypt in 1912. The sperm whale, Physeter macrocephalus, is a species of toothed whale that is the largest toothed predator on Earth. It also has the largest brain of any animal species. It is found in oceans all over the world and can dive to depths of up to 7,000 feet in search of food. You can easily recognize sperm whales by their massive, block-shaped heads, which can measure up to 1/3 of their total body length. They have dark brown or grayish-blue skin and a distinctive wrinkled appearance. The Titanoboa is an extinct genus of a giant snake that lived approximately 58 million years ago. It is considered to be the largest known snake ever. It could grow up to 42 feet and weighed around 2,500 pounds. The first fossils of the Titanoboa were discovered in a coal mine in Colombia in 2004. This discovery meant a lot because it provided insights into the size and behavior of snakes during the Paleocene era, as well as the overall climate and ecosystem of the time. The blue whale, Balænoptera musculus, is the largest animal on Earth, measuring up to 100 feet in length and weighing as much as 200 tons. These marine mammals are found in oceans all over the world and can live up to 90 years. Blue whales have a long, streamlined body that is usually blue-gray in color with mottled patterns. They have a small dorsal fin and 2 pectoral fins that are about 1/3 the length of their body. Blue whales feed on tiny shrimp-like creatures called krill, and they eat a lot. A single adult blue whale can eat up to 8,000 pounds of krill in a day. The Leadsichthus is an extinct genus of large, bony fish that lived during the Jurassic period, approximately 155 million years ago. It is believed to be one of the largest fish that have ever lived. Some estimates suggest that it could grow up to 55 feet in length. The first fossils of Leadsichthus were discovered in England in the 19th century, and more recent discoveries have been made in other parts of Europe, South America, and Africa. Despite its enormous size, the Leadsichthus was a filter feeder, similar to modern-day whale sharks, and likely fed on plankton and other small organisms. The creature did it by simply swimming with its enormous mouth open, filtering water through its gills. The pterodostro is an extinct species of flamingo-like birds that lived approximately 35 million years ago. They were relatively small birds with a wingspan of about 2-3 feet. And they were known for their distinctive long, narrow beaks equipped with comb-like structures used for filter feeding. The pterodostro lived in shallow bodies of water, like lakes and lagoons, and mostly fed on small crustaceans and other tiny organisms. The animal filtered them from the water using the comb-like structures on the inside of its beak while swimming through the water. The African elephant is the largest land animal on Earth and one of the most recognizable ones. There are 2 species of the African elephant, the savanna elephant, Loxodonta africana, and the forest elephant, Loxodonta cyclotis. You can see them in various parts of sub-Saharan Africa. These creatures can be identified by their large size, gray skin, and long trunks. African elephants can grow up to 13 feet tall and weigh up to 14,000 pounds, depending on the species and gender.
In 1952, an Air Force plane called C-124 Globemaster II crashed into a big mountain while flying from Washington to Alaska. Sadly, everyone on board, 52 people in total, didn't make it. The bad weather at the time made it hard to find the crash site, and even later, any attempts to locate it failed. But in 2012, a helicopter crew doing a training mission spotted the pieces of the crashed plane on a glacier called Colony Glacier in Alaska. They started looking for more pieces and confirmed it was indeed the missing plane. Since then, every summer for about a decade, different military groups have been helping in an operation called Colony Glacier. They've managed to identify 40 out of the 52 people whose lives were lost in the crash. The soldiers taking part in this mission take their promise seriously to never leave a fallen comrade behind. They believe it's their duty to bring back those who didn't make it. Another discovery comes from the Alps. In 1991, some hikers exploring the picturesque Alps stumbled upon a human body. It was half frozen in ice at the top of a mountain pass between Italy and Austria. At first, the local police thought it might be a mountaineering accident, but in a few weeks, archaeologists started claiming that this guy might have lived more than 5,000 years ago. They eventually gave the frozen fellow the nickname Ötzi. He was named after the nearby Ötztal Valley. He's become quite famous as the oldest ice mummy on record. Ötzi's frozen state might not be as unique as we thought, and that's where things get really cool. Archaeologists have another theory. See, at first, everyone was convinced that Ötzi marked the start of a cooler period because he had been frozen in the ice without any interruptions since he had lost his life. Yet, over the past few decades, glaciers and ice patches worldwide have been melting away like ice cream on a hot summer day. Not just Ötzi, but other ancient relics like bodies, hunting gear, horse droppings, and even ancient skis started to appear. So, archaeologists say there are similar sites. They found quite a few, and they all fit perfectly into this growing field of glacial archaeology. It seems like as the world warms up, it will show even more ancient secrets from the deep freeze. Moving on to another amazing discovery. In 2018, William Taylor and Nick Jarman were exploring the snowy slopes of Mongolia's Altai Mountains. They found an ancient treasure trove hidden in the ice. Inside the trove, they found a well-preserved 3,000-year-old arrow shaft adorned with ochre markings. It was in pristine condition, a rarity for organic items that old. They found other items too, like a bronze arrowhead with bits of animal sinew still attached. All of these relics had been untouched for hundreds of years, since they had been locked in the ice. In Mongolia, rising temperatures have melted ice patches that remained frozen for centuries. Similar discoveries have been made in the Yukon, US, Italy, Siberia, and Norway. Thousands of sites have been identified. Yet, scientists are racing against time to document and preserve these artifacts before they're lost forever. The study of these artifacts challenges the definition of these environments as wildernesses and shows how indigenous people coexisted with nature there. Sometimes people find simple items too, as simple as a sandal. This one, discovered on one of central Norway's mountain passes, indicates that people used this route roughly 1,700 years ago. This suggests that there was less snow and ice in that area back then. The sandal, dating back to around 300 BCE, resembles Roman sandals of that era. Again, in Norway, hunters found an iron sword high up on a mountain, more than 5,250 feet above sea level. There's no nearby burial site, and it's puzzling why someone would have a sword in such a remote location. Archaeologists speculate that the owner might have become lost. Then, in 2011, unusual objects resembling giant slingshots began to emerge as the ice melted. Radiocarbon dating suggests that this particular object was crafted around 400 BCE. It measures over 3 feet long and has knife cuts. Those puzzled archaeologists until one team member recognized them as tang, or pliers, used to secure loads on sleds when transporting hay or leaving for animal food. People in the area used hay sleds with pliers until the 1950s, when tractors became more common. Now, let's get back in time to thousands of years ago. We can easily do that by looking at this woolly mammoth. This creature looks a bit like a cherished but slightly worn-out toy. This ancient giant, whose heyday was 39,000 years ago, is the best-preserved mammoth ever found. Even its signature shaggy hair is surprisingly well-preserved, having been trapped in glacial ice until its recent discovery in Siberia. This remarkable animal is stepping into the limelight in Yokohama, Japan. Scientists are running tests that might bring this extinct species back to life. When they stumbled upon this female mammoth, they uncovered a hidden treasure, a sample of her blood preserved beneath the ice. So they believe this ancient blood could hold the key to resurrecting the mammoth. They also found well-preserved muscle tissue. She was between 50 and 60 years old when she met her icy fate. The discovery of mammoth blood has reignited debates about the ethics of bringing back extinct creatures, like in Jurassic Park. Their ambitious plan is to implant an egg into a living elephant for a 22-month pregnancy, hoping that at least one living mammoth cell might survive. Hop on, we're going to the French Alps. We are at a spot not far from where an Air India plane tragically crashed 46 years ago. We're accompanied by a diligent mountain rescuer and his neighbor. They went to this area after a bunch of tourists had noticed a strange-looking thingy on a glacier. It was a bag. The Indian embassy in Paris got wind of it, and it was all set on getting that bag. What makes it kinda cool is that it had diplomatic mail and Ministry of External Affairs written on it. The Air India flight was on its way from Mumbai to New York when it took a nosedive in January 1966. It took 117 people on board down with it. Guess what else was inside the bag besides the soaked diplomatic mail? It had a stack of old Indian newspapers. So, alongside those, they also found bits of the plane's cabin, a lone shoe, and a bunch of cables. Totally unexpected treasures on that mountain. During the summer of 2013, scientists stumbled upon a message left behind by a geologist named Walker, who had placed it there 44 years before. That message sort of served as the man's last testament. He passed away just a month after hiding the bottle in the rocks on the island. The content of the message was quite astounding. In 1959, Walker had measured the distance from those very stones to the glacier's edge, and it clocked in at a mere 167 feet. By 2013, that distance had ballooned to 400 feet. Researchers are convinced that this stark contrast between the two measurements underscores the consequences of ongoing global warming. Imagine the melting ice in Norway's mountains as a time machine revealing a treasure trove. Nearly 800 Viking artifacts tucked away for over 1,000 years have been unearthed. They give us a peek into the bustling trade networks of the Viking era and the critical role of the mountain passes in this ancient commerce. Among the finds are leather shoes, cozy woolen mittens, stylish tunics, feathered arrowheads, horseshoes, walking sticks, and kitchen gadgets from the Viking chef's toolkit. There are even Viking pack horse souvenirs. These artifacts provide us with insights into ancient travel habits and the peak times when those paths were bustling with activity, and give us a glimpse into the lives of adventurers.